This girl had just died when a pervert took her home, and the pervert was even planning to take advantage of her while she was still warm. Such a twisted thought. It made her disgusted on the spot. It turns out Yunping came to Thousand Ghost Forest to hunt monsters for experience, but unfortunately, the monsters here gave too little experience. Leveling up would take 2.5 years. Just as he was about to leave, he caught a whiff of blood from afar. At this moment, on the other side of the woods, Yi Yuchan was seriously injured, with his two senior sisters standing beside him. "Why are you doing this to me?" Yi Yuchan shouted angrily. In the cold rain, senior sister's hand holding the sword trembled slightly. The two of them had no choice. If they didn't kill Yi Yuchan, then it would be him who died. Seeing Yi Yuchan about to sever emotions, the two senior sisters silently left, and Yi Yuchan, lying in a pool of blood, revealed a mocking smile. In the previous life on Earth, he was also betrayed by those who sought purity. "I didn't expect that even after traveling to another world, it would still be like this." Just as he was ready to die in despair, he suddenly heard another voice next to his ear. "It's such a pity to die like this." Yi Yuchan opened her eyes and saw a man squatting in front of her, shamelessly saying, "How about I take advantage of the heat?" Such an insult. He was so furious that he rejected it on the spot. Yunping poked Yi Yuchan's body. "Are you all right?" "Just a joke," she said, then hoisted him over her shoulder. Humming a tune, she carried Yi Yuchan back to Yuntian Academy. When Yi Yuchan woke up, she was very surprised. She couldn't believe she was still alive. What surprised her even more was that there was actually a Mona Lisa hanging on the wall. "Did I just travel back to Earth again?" Just then, Yunping walked in. "Little girl, hurry up and give your savior a good morning kiss." After saying that, she gave a thumbs up to Yi Yuchan's figure and walked towards the bed. "Don't come over, you scoundrel." Yi Yuchan suddenly realized that this person's voice was the same as that man from before. Could it be he saved me? That's right, it was this handsome guy who saved you. But I want interest in return. Yi Yuchan had never seen someone so shameless, but she didn't have time to think about that. Pointing at the painting on the wall, she said, "Is this painting the Mona Lisa?" As soon as she said that, Yunping was shocked. This girl actually knew the Mona Lisa. Their eyes met, and in an instant, they understood 2.5 years of practice. He felt so happy inside. In the next moment, Ikuan sees Ikuan. Tears well up in both their eyes. The two excitedly hug each other. It takes a moment for them to react. Some things fall because they are too overwhelmed with excitement. Amidst the countless writings in the sky, Yunping helps Yi Yuchan bring a new outfit. "Isn't this too much? Can't you just give me an ordinary robe?" Yunping's eyes gleamed with golden light. "The interest is, you become my maid, and from now on, I will be your master." Then he handed Yuchan a contract to sign. "Although you saved my life, I will never sell my body." Yunting smiled. "With your looks, you think you can break my virgin body? Virgin? Are you a plaything?" When Yuchan opened the contract, it turned out to be an acceptance letter. It was the academy that Yunping had recommended, and staying here without any worries is not bad. Who knew that the next second after signing, a golden pillar of light shot up into the sky. The other students of Yuntian Academy looked excited. "Looks like someone's in trouble again." Upon seeing the golden light, Yuchan was also very surprised. Why would there be heavenly justice? This is something only the strongest elites can conceal. Just who is this man standing before me? Yunping really let Yuchan meet some of the other senior brothers and sisters. "Let me introduce everyone. This is my bed-warming maid. Yuchan will be your 6th junior sister from now on." Everyone present looked at her with affection. The master can finally change. The personal enthusiasm is quite overwhelming. This made Yuchan, who had just experienced betrayal, feel a bit uncomfortable. "I can only awkwardly greet everyone." Then I realized a key issue. Where did the 4 senior brothers come from? Clearly, there are 3 men and 2 women. Yunping poked one of the beauties in the face. "This one is actually your 2nd senior brother. A genuine, pure man." As he spoke, he lifted his robe to show everyone something interesting. "You dirty rogue." And the 2nd brother was furious. He kicked up his long leg and smashed it down on Yunping's head. Yuchan next to him was shocked. This casual kick was more powerful than that of a certain Eastgate's long leg. But Yunping, who got hit into the pit, just scratched his head. Surprisingly, he was unscathed. How terrifying are the abilities of these two? At this moment, Yunping told everyone to move freely. As she spoke, she took Yuchan to a secluded corner. Then she pinned her against the wall. The pressure she exuded was terrifying. It was even stronger than the princess's. Yuchan tried to resist, but her wrist was grabbed. After that, Shizhuan also gave Yunping. In the next moment, Yunping reached out and pressed his hand on Yuchan's lower abdomen. Could he really be doing this to me? Just as Yi Yuchan was preparing to check if he was a scoundrel, Yunping suddenly picked him up and gave him a bold kiss. At such a young age, what kind of dirty thoughts are in his head? "I saved you, and supported your spiritual roots, Baiwa. Although her life was saved, her cultivation was completely lost, and from now on, she probably won't be able to cultivate again. Yi Yuchan slowly clenched her fists. Tears welled up uncontrollably in her eyes. Losing her spiritual roots, even the highest cultivation couldn't heal her. Once again, she became a useless person, unwanted by anyone. However, a hand rested on his shoulder. The man in front of him said in a very calm tone, "I can give you a spiritual root, but my stock is running low. I can only provide a fire. Choose between gold or jade. These are both legendary top-grade silver roots." What is this man's true identity? Did he not say he was just a garbage collector? I was picked up by him. Looking at Yoon with a calm smile, Yi Yuchan questioned loudly, "Are you checking my identity? I, Yi Yuchan, would rather die by the roadside. Even if I jump down from here, I won't let Nick gain anything." However, Yoon didn't go far. He directly flicked his hand and threw out 3 top-grade silver roots. Looking at the magnificent aura from the supreme spiritual root, "From now on, I, Yi Yuchan, will be young Master Yun's personal maid." The scene then shifts. Yi Yuchan is holding the supreme treasure she just acquired. But this spiritual root looks a bit strange. However, Yunping tells Yi Yuchan to eat it directly. Looking at the supreme spiritual root before her, Yi Yuchan first takes a sniff. There doesn't seem to be any strange smell. Then she stuck out her little tongue and licked it. It really seems to have an effect. To be able to raise 10 men in the future, Yi Yuchan went all out and grabbed the spirit root. She swallowed it in one gulp. That was huge. "I'll never try this again." Yunping was groaning in pain on the side. Wei Shu suddenly felt uncomfortable. Yi Yuchan glared at him fiercely. She swung her long leg and kicked toward Yunping, but Yunping smoothly grabbed it directly. To him, that kick felt as light as a baby's touch. Yi Yuchan was utterly shocked. That kick had been stronger than when she was at her peak. Could it really be the best of the best? Then, to keep her promise, Yi Yuchan closed her eyes and threw herself directly onto Yunting, pressing her whole body against Yunting. Just as Yi Yuchan blushed, ready to treat the audience, Yunping suddenly slapped her. "Save this for when we're home tonight." Hearing this, Yi Yuchan shyly tried to get up. What a scumbag. Takes advantage and acts innocent. May he stay single forever. But Yunping calmly asked again, "Where is your family?" What the girl did next shocked him greatly. As Yi Yuchan began emitting a demonic, terrifying aura, when he turned around again, his entire aura had changed. He looked as if he were possessed by a demon. Yi Yuchan charged toward Consort Yun, wanting to tear her apart, but Consort Yun just waved her hand, easily subduing Yi Yuchan. He was lifted effortlessly by the waist. She looked at him gently. Seems like this girl also has some bad memories. This man not only kicked senior sister flat, but also used her flesh as a footrest. He even mocked that the flesh couldn't hold a double roast. Although it felt good underfoot, Yunping still left leisurely. After all, so many people were watching him from below. He immediately grabbed the woman's neck. "I only have one question. Where is your master, the system expert?" It turns out Yunping came to Tianbei Lake to avenge his young disciple. To gather information, he disguised himself as a novice. As soon as he arrived at the square, he noticed someone fighting, and on the platform, there was a group of big shots. Looking at the long black-stockinged legs on the seat next to him, Yunping sighed inwardly. This girl used to be just a little kid with tiny feet. Just as Yunping stretched lazily, getting ready to show off, a small hand tapped his lower back. Yunping turned around to see a pink-haired girl, clearly trying to hide the fact she was cross-dressing, raising her hand. "Are you looking to buy some medicine? You look like a guy with a problem. If you don't get treated soon, your girlfriend will run off with someone else. Also, I can tell you need assistance every time you're together. If you buy medicine from me now, I'll even throw in 3 free COVID tests." Yunping smirked. He instantly leaned closer to the girl with pink hair. "Why don't you come experience for yourself if I'm really a skinny dog? How about that?" The pink-haired girl chuckled at that. After practicing disguise for 2.5 years, she was still found out. She quickly grabbed her banner and dashed off. However, Yunping picked up a copper coin nearby, which the pink-haired girl had just dropped. On the other side, the pink-haired girl hurriedly ran to her martial uncle and master. "Master, I ran into Ultraman." The martial uncle once said that the person who can see through my disguise is destined for me. I will help him become a warrior who charges for love. But the martial uncle was full of tension. "Did you leave a good impression on him?" "Of course I did. I even gave him 3 free nucleic acid tests." Just when the master was looking worried, the girl with pink hair pointed at the ring. "Master, look quickly. The man up there is the one I just met." And another point, in the ring, Yunping is clasping his fists in respect to senior sister Tian Beifu. And this person is the one who killed his disciple back then. Liang's face was full of disdain. "This person specifically named me to challenge. Does he even look in the mirror? What kind of person does he see? With one move, I'll break your will to fight." Then, he took a quick step towards Yunting. Looking at the threatening Liang Shi, Yunting casually lifted his right foot. "Don't think that just because you have 2 lumps of flesh on your chest, you can add double beds." As thick white smoke rolled over the ring, Liang Shi, the senior sister of the sect, was pinned firmly to the wall. He struggled to get up, but Yunping stomped him back down. No double beds for you. It's not bad to use this as a footrest. This man actually used senior sister's 2 pieces of meat as a footrest, and mocked that these 2 pieces couldn't even hold a double stove. Although the feeling underfoot was quite good, Yunping still slowly walked away. After all, so many people were watching. She then suddenly grabbed the woman's neck. I'll only ask once. Where is your little dog, master? The good master looked terrified. Has he discovered our secret? The surrounding senior brothers also widened their eyes. Did the master rescue this newcomer? Why is he so skilled? Meanwhile, Yunping whispered to the good master, your junior sister is still alive. This is now my warm bedchamber. Get ready to pay the price. The master's pupils contracted for a moment. Then memories began flooding back. He and Yi Yuchan grew up together since childhood, practicing dance together like sisters. He loved his junior sister's angelic smile, but the good times didn't last long. The elder of the sect set his sights on Yi Yuchan. He demanded to engage in dual cultivation with her. Liangshi had long heard rumors of the sect's corrupt dual cultivation. He immediately knelt and begged the elder to spare his junior sister. However, the elder simply said calmly, if you don't do it, I'll do it myself. As he gazed at Yi Yuchan's innocent eyes, Master Liang ultimately decided that even killing his junior sister himself would be better than sending her to her doom. After recalling all of this, Master Liang, filled with tears, expressed that he had no way to repay the favor and only asked Yunping to treat the junior sister well. However, at that moment, a gust of wind came from behind Yunping. An elder appeared, leading several disciples in the rear, boldly and torrentially, in broad daylight, teasing me from the shadows. Disciple, quickly let him go. Let me see Yunping as the big men surround themselves, just sneering coldly, then unexpectedly pulled out a mortar. What the hell? This is a cultivation incident. The group of big shots in the audience widened their eyes as the mortar fire ignited. All the disciples of Tianxian Valley around them were turned to ash. Just as Yunping was about to interrogate the elder, a group of people dressed in green surrounded him. Yunping pulled the trigger, ready to fire another round at them, but he didn't expect that the thing was a one-time use. The one in green immediately flew up and beat Yunping's face into a pig's head. At the same time, the food beside them suddenly splattered, unable to protect the junior sister. At that moment, they begged for forgiveness for the junior sister, only hoping Yunping would treat Yuchen well. However, such a scene that only appears in novels clearly won't happen here. The food was quickly picked up and then thrown aside. On the ground, Yunping lay helplessly. To be honest, I don't understand this. It's definitely a case of pretending to be weak. I'll update tomorrow. This man can be called the Jiang Jinfu of the cultivation world. He not only used senior sister's 2 lumps of meat as footrests, he even hit the master who tried to stop the fight, making her breasts shrink. Turns out Yunping was pretending to be weak. He deliberately let a group of nobodies knock him down. This attracted the elder with the biggest breasts in the sect to attack. She proudly raised her chest. She didn't take Yunping seriously at all. That Yi Yuchan was just a lowly little shy one. He should be grateful for the chance to have dual cultivation with her. Yunping was furious. Is this the conduct of the Sanyuan Academy now? Gongxin licked his fingers. I'm an elder of the Sanyuan Academy. Xingming, you look refined. If you willingly become my servant, I might just spare you. Then he turned to look at the grain that had protected Yunping earlier. Let me show you the fate of those who oppose the academy. I saw Gong Xian wave his right hand at Liangshi. A powerful suction force suddenly surged up from beside Liangshi. It wrapped around him and flew towards Gong Xian. Gong Xian also seized Liangshi by the neck. His other hand aimed at Liangshi's forearm. As his fingers slowly pressed in, a heart-wrenching scream echoed throughout the venue. Master Liang's spiritual root was actually dug out. Seeing Master Liang in pain, Gong Xian revealed a cruel smile. This is the consequence of opposing the academy. Liang Shi's looked in despair at his dugout spiritual palace. Junior sister must have felt this pain too, but Yunping just quietly watched. Let Master Liang reflect on this for now. On the other side, Gong Xian picked up Yunping's counterattack robe. Pretty boy, hand over the energy source of this magical artifact. Serve me for another 3 to 5 years, and I might spare your life. Yunping also pretended to be very scared. She threw a storage ring directly at Gong Xian. Good, I like smart boys. But the next second, like an explosion from a nuclear bomb, I don't know how much time has passed. The people scattered. Yunping confidently tossed her hair and stopped pretending. I can take on 10 of you. You old busybody still wanna make me your boyfriend? If you stand next to me naked, I wouldn't even look at you. However, Gong Xian laughed. She then raised the ring in her hand. This is a protective charm crafted personally by the founder of the academy. That last attack, if you can pull it off 3 more times, I'll kneel right down and call you my parents. But before Gong Xian could arrive, a violent sound erupted. Yunping unleashes a powerful flying dragon in the sky and advises Gongxin that she cannot use any skills while in a rigid state midair. Then, a brilliant deceive the heavens, cross the sea. As the smoke fades away, the trembling Gongxin slowly stands up. I am the daughter of the elder of Santian Academy. Try touching me again. However, a hand quietly rested on his head. The 3 Days Academy, huh? It seems I founded it. Gong Xingchen was horrified to learn this news, but in the face of a wayward but wise mentor, the male lead ultimately chose to forgive. The reason he didn't save himself from Gong Xingchen's hands was because that night, he made Yi Yuzhen wish he were dead, but the male lead still chooses to treat him. After all, he just recklessly took those punches for him. After healing him, the male lead said to him, "After today, your grievances with Yi Yuzhen will be settled." After saying that, the male lead turned to leave but was suddenly grabbed by Liang Shi. She said, "Can you help me pass a message to Yi Yuzhen?" The male lead did not refuse this request. After all, this statement could help Yi Yuzhen overcome her shadow. After he finished speaking, with a swoosh, the male lead disappeared without a trace. Having seen the entire fight, the mastermind can now be sure that the male lead is the person he is looking for. For hundreds of years, only the martial emperor and the literary emperor have broken through to true immortal among the three great heavenly realms. Even half-immortals are extremely rare. Besides the 21 perfection, there's only the 7 dream arts and Su the half-immortal from our blue sky palace. There are quite a few below the half-immortal level, but over the years, almost no one has advanced to half-immortal. Now suddenly there's a star that surpasses even the immortal. It's still the child of prophecy. It seems like the tide is about to change. The scene shifts. The male lead has already returned to his base. When he walks into his room, he finds the light still on. He thinks someone is waiting for him, but just as the male lead was about to open the door, he heard some indescribable sounds from inside. To find out what was going on, he made a small hole in the door. When he looked inside, what he saw made his eyes widen. Lin Yuan was scrubbing Yi Yuchan's back. The scene was truly as beautiful as a painting. The male lead outside the door had a massive nosebleed, and the sound of him falling caught Lin Yuan's attention. When they opened the door, they found the male lead already on the ground. Immediately, Ling Yuan rushed into his arms. "Teacher, you're back so soon. Yuer has been really good today." She even supervised 6th junior sister's medicinal bath. She even gave him a massage to clear his meridians. Seeing him acting all cute, the male lead pinched his face and said, "Yuer, you're really reliable as a senior sister. Go rest early. Tomorrow the teacher will give you a new sheet of music. It's from Emperor 1. Lin Yuan also listened obediently to the male lead. After he finished speaking, she waved goodbye to the male lead. But Yi Yuzhen was different. She questioned the male lead relentlessly. "Where have you been? So mysteriously. And you had Shiji and the others keep it from me." The male lead didn't explain much. He directly took out the recovered Xianin spirit root. The moment he saw the Xianin spirit root, Yi Yuzhen displayed an expression of disbelief. He didn't expect that he would be willing to confront those forces for her. Then the male lead took her hand and handed the Xianin spirit root to her. At that moment, Yi Yuchan's impression of the male lead subtly changed. Facing her beautiful disciple's open affection, the male protagonist resolutely pushed him away. What exactly is going on? This goes back to when the male protagonist handed the Xianin spirit root to Yi Yuchan. At that time, not only did the male protagonist return the Xianin spirit root to him, but he also told Yi Yuchan that someone wanted him to pass on a message. That is, a good teacher. His guilt towards him is that the senior sister wronged him. Upon hearing this, Yi Yuchan clenched his fists, trembling slightly. "I don't care what will happen to your senior sister in the future, but I just hope you can let go of your hatred. You are my disciple. I believe you can do it." Just as the male lead finished speaking, a wave of demonic energy erupted from Yi Yuzhan's body. At this moment, he was once again blinded by hatred. It seems to be controlled by the monster, and the monster keeps suggesting to Yi Yuchan in his mind to surrender his body to it. As Yi Yuchan's eyes slowly turn red, the monster successfully gains control once again. Then he leans into the male lead's arms, saying, "I promise you, is there any reward for that?" He says this while touching parts of the male lead's body. Then, taking advantage of the male lead's distraction, it opened its bloody maw and lunged at his neck. Unfortunately, it was thwarted. Instead, the male lead ruthlessly pushed it away, and in the process, blasted the creature out of Yi Yuchan's body. Seizing the opportunity, he sealed it within the formation. The deceived creature flew into a rage, but it was already too late. Then the protagonist mocks him, saying he's made no progress in hundreds of years. Who else is there to blame? As the formation activates, he gets sucked in bit by bit. It's only at this moment that he begins to beg for mercy, but the protagonist ignores him. Seeing that he's about to be completely sealed inside the formation, he starts raging helplessly. Put down the harsh words. In the end, you can't escape the fact of being sealed. However, the male lead cannot eliminate this thing for now. Otherwise, it would harm Yi Yuchan's foundation. So the male lead can only temporarily seal it within Yi Yuchan. He'll eliminate it when the time is right. The scene shifts. Yi Yuchan wakes up groggily from his dreams. But after waking up, he found his whole body ached. It felt as if he had been beaten up. The male lead explained that he had tripped and fainted at the door. However, Yi Yuchan didn't believe his nonsense at all. But thinking about how he offended those powerful forces for her sake, she didn't press him further. He claimed he wanted to show Yi Yuchan the treasure. That was quite shocking. Even Yi Yuchan found it hard to accept. What's it like to pick up a beautiful disciple at the start? The protagonist even thought about you know what. Not a bad idea, honestly, but it can't be done. After all, I'm a proper content creator. Who would have thought the next day the protagonist took him to the dance studio? The key is, his other disciples were all on break. Only the two of them are left. Thinking of this, Yi Yu-chan immediately became shy. After all, he had been training one-on-one with the male lead all day. When asked what the little treasure the male lead mentioned last night was, the male lead told him it was a technique, and he needed to discard the techniques he had practiced before. The male lead was going to give him a better one, but he had studied his techniques so hard for so many years. How could he just abandon them? This made Yi Yu-chan feel somewhat reluctant. Since that's the case, the male lead proposed a bet. He challenged him to punch Zhuangzi using his current techniques. If Zhuangzi broke, he would follow his lead. If not, then he had to listen to the male lead. Then Yi Yu-chan agreed to do it. He closed his eyes to rest. He focused all his power into his fist. In the next second, he unleashed an unstoppable mountain-crashing punch on the post in front of him. After the punch landed, he didn't even look at the result. Instead, he confidently declared that his mountain-crashing punch was pretty good. But in return, he was met with the hero's merciless ridicule. "Are you sure you call that a mountain-crashing punch? Looks more like a turtle punch to me." The size and shape are quite similar. A flurry of intense operations, only to check the score, 0-5. "Yeah, I'm talking about you." Under the male lead's relentless taunts, Yi Yu-chan began to doubt himself. He even started suspecting the male lead tampered with the chessboard. Then the male lead explained that the chessboard was made of special wood. Regular attacks are definitely ineffective. Hearing this, Yi Yu-chan began to protest, but the protagonist didn't give him a chance. Then, the protagonist pointed at the mountain opposite and said, "See that? Those mountains are piled with all the Zhuangzi your senior brothers and sisters broke." Looking at the countless Zhuangzi on the mountain, that was just their battle achievements from the Xian sect period. Hearing the male lead's words, Yi Yu-chan finally realized she really is worthless. But don't be discouraged. Once you change your cultivation technique, you'll catch up to them. But Yi Yu-chan still felt down. After all, a high-grade level 6 technique isn't like common techniques, and spiritual weapons have 7 grades. They're also ranked into tiers. It's not so easy to find one. High-grade cultivation techniques are extremely rare, let alone possessing one. Just catching a glimpse of one would be enough for a lifetime. Yet the technique he currently has is at least of high grade, 6th class, and he still thinks his own garbage technique is powerful. The protagonist had no choice but to throw out a bunch of junk from his space ring, saying, "I don't have many high-grade ones, but I do have quite a few heavenly grade ones. These things have been sitting here for a while, and they're starting to get in the way." But before the main character could finish speaking, Yi Yu-chan had already laid down in the pile of manuals. Sure enough, the speed at which this girl changes her mood is top tier. Just moments ago, she was sulking and annoyed at the main character, but now she feels like her life has peaked. Look at her, like she's never seen the world. The main character figured he should personally help Yi Yu-chan find the manual that best suited her spiritual roots. Then, he picked up a green scroll. He said that this 1000-blade technique is the most suitable for your Azure Jade spirit root. Excitedly, he snatched the technique from the male lead's hands. "This is too extravagant. Am I really not dreaming? Any random one is a heaven-level technique of the 6th grade." Looking at the contents inside, Yi Yu-chan himself couldn't believe it. In his lifetime, he actually possessed a heaven-level technique of the 6th grade. Watching Yi Yu-chan giggle foolishly while holding the technique, the protagonist felt a bit speechless. "Wipe the drool off your mouth. We need to find the next thing." The scene changes. They arrive at what appears to be a very rundown house. Even the entrance is covered with cobwebs. Yi Yu-chan thought, maybe there's really a hidden master here. A whole new world. The protagonist saw no response after knocking, so he had to shout for the door to be opened, while increasing the force of his knocks. Finally, with the protagonist's persistent efforts, the door was opened. A seemingly ordinary blacksmith walked out from inside, and he seemed to recognize the protagonist. Regarding the arrival of the male lead, he did not give the male lead a good face, because he knows that every time the male lead comes here, it's to exploit his apprentice. He just took in a Yi Yu-chan, so the male lead came here again. As soon as he entered the room, it was filled with all kinds of dilapidated weapons. At first, Yi Yu-chan thought these broken things were definitely just a facade. Don't be deceived by appearances. But no matter how he looks at it, it doesn't seem like a place that can produce advanced weapons. What's it like to start off with a beautiful disciple? The male lead is even thinking about going straight for it. The idea is pretty good, but it just can't be carried out. After all, I'm a serious blogger. Meanwhile, on the male lead's side, he's negotiating prices with the blacksmith. At first, the male lead didn't wait for him to make a request, and said, "I get it. 2 shares, right?" But when the blacksmith heard it was only 2 shares, he immediately pushed the male lead away, saying, "Don't play dumb, you old bastard. I want 20 shares. I heard him open his mouth like a lion. The male protagonist was also shocked. "Why don't you grab 20 copies? Have you seen the name of our Qigong shop? Love comes or goes. Faced with his shameless behavior, the male protagonist stretched out 5 fingers tremblingly. Do you know how hard it is for me to collect materials? 5 is the maximum we can have. The upcoming scene is easy to imagine. They argued like ordinary people haggling in a market. Just as they were getting into a heated debate, Yi Yu-chan was squatting nearby and accidentally broke a dagger. In the end, they reached a consensus of 10. Clearly, the male lead looked drained. Immediately after, the male lead took out 10 packs of pickled mustard greens and gave them to him. Seeing this, Yi Yu-chan was speechless. After all that searching, they had been arguing about instant noodles for so long. At this moment, the blacksmith suddenly looked at him. He was so scared he trembled. This girl has some skills. She made old Wangba bleed that much. He was still the first one. After they finally agreed on the weapon details, the blacksmith happily sent off the protagonist's group. But the protagonist was furious. So much for their so-called brotherhood. It was worthless compared to a bowl of pickled mustard noodles. Can you believe it? This little blacksmith turned out to be the genius Duan Shang. Not only that, he also likes eating pickled mustard greens. Everyone knows, after the main characters left, he realized that the dagger and hammer he forged were destroyed. He was furious. And this scene was overheard by the group. They began to doubt if the person inside was really Duan Shang. After all, the house, the level of dilapidation raises some questions about his character. Perhaps saints of Duan Shang's caliber are extraordinary beings who regard money as worthless. In later generations, saints can also emerge. Just as they were discussing this, the front door suddenly opened. Someone walked out from inside. At this moment, he was eating pickled mustard greens and asked, "Who are you all? Why are you standing at my doorstep?" When someone came out, Jigwantu immediately clasped his hands and greeted, "Lord Duan Shang, we have come here with an urgent request." But regarding their request, Duan Shang didn't care. He said if they wanted ready-made goods, they could pick from inside. If it's custom-made, just look at the prices listed. Looking at the clearly marked prices for custom orders, it was practically daylight robbery. It made them hesitate. Seeing no response from them, Duan Shang turned around and was about to head back inside. The officer quickly stopped him. "Your Excellency, please wait. I am a descendant of the Lan Yutian. Manhua really has an urgent matter to request." As soon as he heard the name, Duan Shang suddenly realized, "It's Lan Yutian. I remember that little kid. I even held you when you were small. Is Lan Yu Tiangong in trouble? Tell me, what do you want me to fix? After all, I promised Lan Yu to look after you." "Wait until he's done talking." The mechanism head took out a glowing orb and said, "This is what we need your help fixing. This artifact has a crack on its surface. Turns out, it's the sole artifact of Lan Yu's celestial soldiers, one of the 21 ultimate artifacts. How did it get damaged? The sole artifact is about to shatter." Faced with his question, even his disciples don't know the exact reason. They can only beg Duan Shang to help repair it. Seeing the sole artifact in such a critical state, Duan Shang seems to realize the world is about to change. No word yet on whether the male lead, that old rascal, has any news. The scene shifts. On a street somewhere, people come and go. The male lead discovers something incredible. He actually sees Jiang Yuetian fighting with someone. As he gets closer, he realizes he's fighting someone from the Lord's mansion. He even says, "I'll make you let me play the flute." "Are you still going to make me play the flute?" The beaten-up Zayagaga immediately begs for mercy. Meanwhile, the male lead is completely confused. He has no idea what's going on. What's it like to have a beautiful apprentice right from the start? The male lead even thinks about getting intimate with her. Not a bad idea. But it's not something he can actually do. After all, I'm a proper content creator. No way. The male lead's apprentice actually started performing for money because she was broke, who knew his appearance was mistaken for a woman, and he was forced to play the flute. Such explosive information. Yi Yu-chan seems a bit overwhelmed, but the male lead knows Jiang Yuetian's character very well. It's definitely because he lost all his money due to drug addiction that he resorted to performing for money. This storyline, Jiang Yuetian didn't deny it either. However, the male lead didn't blame him. Instead, he said that he was in a good mood today. He wanted to play a few rounds with him, thinking of winning back the money Jiang Yuetian lost. Upon hearing their conversation, Yi Yu-chan seemed to have discovered a huge secret. "I didn't expect that senior brother Jiang had this trait, and they weren't idle either." They hurried to the casino. Behind them, Yi Yu-chan quietly noted this down. However, this action was just caught by the male lead. When the male lead asked him what he was doing, Yi Yu-chan immediately panicked. He quickly hid the small notebook in his hand. He said it was nothing. "I'm just keeping track of the people who bullied senior brother Jiang." However, what he actually records are the top-tier big shots around him. It states that the male lead is an old pervert. Unfathomable. Ling Yuan is a soft, cute loli, a hidden dark manipulator, and Jiang Yuetian is a cross-dressing master with god-tier combat skills. The other three are still not familiar. As the scene shifts, they arrive at a luxurious casino. Just standing at the entrance makes them a bit nervous. Inside, it's a sea of people. Every table is packed. As the male lead and his group enter the casino, a woman dressed revealingly immediately comes over to greet them. She says, "Oh, our big spender has arrived." The guys around started egging him on. "Looks like he brought a friend to play today. Why not start with the beginner's level? That way, even if you lose, it won't be a total wipeout. Hearing this, a hot-tempered Jiang Yuetian couldn't stand it. He was about to go up and give them a beating, but the protagonist stopped him. Don't rush, let me show you. Look at me. Then the male lead arrogantly said to them, when it comes to gambling, I've never been afraid of anyone. What's the point of a beginner level? If we're going to play, let's play for big stakes. At first, the girl dressed provocatively examined the male lead. Then she leaned over onto the male lead, saying, this young man really has guts. I just don't know how big you want to play. For the male lead, of course, the bigger, the better. Upon hearing this, he started rubbing against the male lead. In the end, they decided to play the most thrilling game of building a garden. Seeing the male lead looking so tired and lecherous, he was completely mesmerized. This made Ye Zhen incredibly furious. Then they arrived at the gambling table in the park. After they sat down, the onlookers all thought the protagonist would lose. Even Zhang Yuetian thought so too. To help the protagonist get familiar with the rules quickly, Zhang Yuetian decided to demonstrate once, to help the protagonist avoid any pitfalls, even though he loses every time he gambles. But this spirit of self-sacrifice is really a special kind of foolishness. In this genuine game, the banker first inputs 0 yuan of force. Players place their chips on the corresponding numbers. Then, 5 short swords drop. This time, Zhang Yuetian bet all 100 gold coins on number 7. If the sword doesn't fall into the numbered hole, then it's a loss. Zhang Yuetian, the gambler, didn't expect that. In order to cover it up, he would bet 100 gold coins all at once. For someone who always loses when gambling, this was likely another losing game. However, after Yi Yuchan's careful consideration, he came up with a brilliant way to cover it up. This guaranteed loss didn't need Zhang Yuetian to cover it up at all. The key is that he still used 100 gold coins at once to cover up this calligraphy. In Zhang Yuetian's eyes, losing money has become a common occurrence for him, but the money he lost all belonged to Yi Yuchan. This made him angrier the more he thought about it. Fortunately, the male lead was there to intervene. Otherwise he would have gone into a rage mode again. During their argument, the girl across seemed a bit impatient. She asked, have you guys made up your minds yet? Are we still playing or not? It was precisely that gesture that made the protagonist notice the faint shadow of a sword on his chest. At that moment, the protagonist understood everything. It turns out he had been cheating throughout the entire game. But even knowing this, the male lead chooses to continue gambling. He even directly bets 5,000 gold coins. He puts it all on 0. This time, the male lead intends to make him lose everything. What is the experience of picking up a beautiful apprentice at the start? The male lead is even thinking about directly having his way. The idea is actually quite good, but it just can't be implemented. After all, I am a legitimate blogger. Facing such a grand gesture from the male lead, the girl was a bit impressed, but the people around thought the male lead was just throwing money around. Just as he was about to start, he suddenly let out a shy cry. This scene made everyone around blush. No one expected the male lead to sneak attack the girl's assets. Who wouldn't be confused watching this? Not only that, the male lead also squeezed and calmly said, I'm just curious if this is really natural. This inappropriate scene in dialogue made Zhang Yuetian directly cover Yi Yuchan's ears. To help him calm down, the male lead's strange behavior left the girl feeling puzzled. Could it be that he discovered something? But she had hidden it so secretly. When she looked at the male lead, she found he was still savoring the earlier feelings. This made her breathe a sigh of relief. After that, she didn't think about it any further. Throws 5 short swords directly. The setup begins. Meanwhile, the protagonist has been waiting for a long time, but the disciples behind him are extremely nervous. As unbelievable shouts echo from the casino, they never expected this. This time, the protagonist actually won. At this very moment, Zhang Yuetian and Yi Yuchan jumped with joy. The spectators enthusiastically praised the male lead. Since there is a winner, there must be a loser, and the losing side is the casino. Seeing the girl's sour expression, the male lead said, did you realize you can't control your flying sword? Only then did the girl understand. Just now, the male lead deliberately touched her chest, but now, it's too late to react. The key is, the male lead is about to reveal that these 5 flying swords are his lifebound artifacts, refined with his blood essence. Everything is controlled by his will. Then, the male lead picks up a flying sword. He lifts the girl's chin with it, boldly asking her, was I right just now? But how could she admit it? If this gets out, the boss behind the scenes won't let him go. Seeing that he still hasn't admitted it, the male lead can only say one more thing. Let's see if I'll wipe you out at the casino first, or if you'll expose yourself first. Upon hearing this, the girl suddenly feels a surge of power, emitting a powerful aura. In the face of his actions, the onlookers immediately hid behind the male lead. They thought he was going to unleash a big move, but unexpectedly, with a bang, he disappeared. Only 2 unidentified objects remained. It turned out he had just shrunk in size. After weaving through the crowd, he escaped with his life. Regarding this matter, he needs to hurry back to report to the mastermind. The scene shifts. At this moment, he is covered in blood and looks like he's on the verge of death. Meanwhile, in a courtyard somewhere, he was carried out by 2 people. Someone stepped forward to report that young Master Chen had come to visit. The owner of this courtyard is none other than Zhong Tianying, the mastermind behind the casino. As for this visit from young Master Chen, it's nothing more than him causing trouble again. When young Master Chen came before him, it turned out to be the man who was beaten up by Zhang Yuetian earlier. Who would have thought he was the son of the city lord? Zhong Tianying saw him and asked, "What brings you here?" He took the scroll from the young man's hand. Right in front of Zhong Tianying, he unrolled it. He said, "Today, I was tricked by that little girl. Brother Zhong, you know a lot of people. Help me find her. I'm going to kill her myself." And this person was the one causing trouble at Zhong Tianying's casino. Angry, he sent his men to invite 3 fighters. The scene shifts. On a rural path somewhere, the protagonist is blocked by some people who suddenly appeared. Unexpectedly, they had just let the girl from the casino go. Now they're facing these roadblockers. Since you've asked so sincerely, I'll mercifully tell you. What's it like to start with a beautiful female disciple? The protagonist is even thinking about doing something naughty right away. It's a pretty bold idea, but it's just not feasible. After all, I'm a proper content creator. Nono Kaiyuan's 7th top fighter, played by Dali Nyo and Mo1. The 3 little killers in front of us were sent by Zhongtian Eagle faction. Before the main character and his team could speak, the trio had already chosen their respective targets. Without saying a word, they immediately attacked. The bull demon, seeing Jiang Lietian dressed in red, charged at him fiercely with the wind at his back. After all, he is a wind bull and very sensitive to red. But fortunately, Zhang Yuetian is agile. He leaped up and dodged it. For the rampaging bull demon king, the large tree in front of him is like paper. It breaks upon impact. His strength is impressive, but unfortunately, his mind isn't very sharp. He doesn't even realize that his own moves have been dodged. I thought Zhang Yuetian was knocked into the air by him. Little did I know, Zhang Yuetian had already jumped onto a tree, watching him make a fool of himself from above. I thought I'd run into someone I could play around with. Who knew he wasn't too bright? When he turned to look behind him, he saw Yi Yuchan being chased by Qiu Qianlian. It was clear Yi Yuchan was in trouble. I intended to step in and help him, but he immediately dismissed that idea. Let the teacher handle the hero saving the damsel thing. Otherwise, I might end up being a third wheel. Meanwhile, on the male lead side, he watched as Yi Yuchan was being chased. He didn't act immediately. Instead, he wondered how long Yi Yuchan could hold out. After all, it's rare to have someone show up for practice, but he waited there for a long time. No one came to bother him. Just when he thought the fight was all about chivalry, a figure appeared above his head. At that moment, the birdman in the sky looked at the motionless protagonist. He couldn't help but sigh. We still have weaklings who don't even know how to run. Forget it. I'm paid to solve problems for others. Then an iron claw attacked the male lead. Immediately, it gripped the male lead's shoulder. It lifted him into the air. Seeing this scene, Yi Yuchen quickly called out for his teacher. Unfortunately, it was of no use. He even found himself in trouble, because in this brief moment, Qiu Qianlian caught up with him. Facing his relentless approach, Yi Yuchan felt an unprecedented sense of fear. As his iron chain came striking towards him, all Yi Yuchan could do was to put all his effort into blocking the attack. Will he succeed in blocking it? Let's wait and see. What kind of disciple is this beautiful one he picked up at the start? The male lead was even thinking about getting frisky. Not a bad idea, honestly, but it's just not doable. After all, I'm a serious content creator. When his disciple was in danger, the master just stood there watching. In the end, he got grabbed by the birdman himself and was taken into the sky. Now Yi Yuchan can only rely on herself to deal with Xiao Gaga, but their cultivation levels differ greatly. As a result, Qiu Qianlian's first attack, although she managed to dodge it, she wouldn't be so lucky next time. Then Qiu Qianlian suddenly threw out the iron chain in his hand. Before Yi Yuchan could react, her leg was already bound by him. He just pulled hard without thinking. Yi Yuchan's whole body leaned back under the force. With a thud, he fell heavily to the ground. Looking at Yi Yuchan in front of him, Qiu Qianlian couldn't help but lick the corner of his mouth. After all, he looked quite lewd in that position. He must enjoy it, right? Then Qiu Qianlian didn't say a word. He raised the iron chain and whipped it toward Yi Yuchan. As expected, Yi Yuchan took the blow squarely, and it landed right between her chest. That'll teach you to disobey. This little punishment is just the appetizer. If you keep struggling, the tighter my chains became. Facing this old pervert, Yi Yuchan had no way to deal with him, and after seeing blood, he seemed to get even crazier. Now, there's only one chance left to survive. That is using seduction. Yi Yuchan slowly lifted her maid's dress. She coyly said, "Let's talk this through nicely. Why resort to violence?" As soon as she said that, Qiu Qianlian's nostrils flared with anger, his blood boiling. Because he was blinded by lust, Yi Yuchan seized the opportunity, delivering a brutal kick that had him screaming in agony. Then, she kicked him in the face again. This was to make up for Yi Yuchan's resentment. With a simple kick, Xiao Qianlian was sent flying 100 meters away. The pain of losing his son made Xiao Qianlian roll on the ground endlessly. Once he calmed down a bit, he pointed at Yi Yuchan and spat out harsh words. You filthy woman. How dare you mess with me? You're as good as dead. Don't drain all your blood and turn you into a puppet. I'll keep draining you every day. Faced with his threats, Yi Yuchan wasn't intimidated at all. He even taunted him, saying if you have the guts, just chase me. If you catch me, do whatever you want. Since Yi Yuchan dared to make such a bold statement, that shows he's very confident in his ability to run away. And it's because of Yi Yuchan's words that the chase started again. As for the male lead, he and Qi Mengshu were somewhere drinking tea and playing chess, seemingly not caring at all about Yi Yuchan being hunted. After all, the male lead came to see Qi Mengshu, probably to get some benefits for Yi Yuchan. Then the male lead began to pry into his words. My disciple is great in every way, but his physique still needs some work. Without thinking, Qi Mengshu blurted out, what's the big deal? Just find a place for him to train his physique. Immediately, the male lead followed up. So where is the best training place for physique under heaven? Of course, it's with me, Qi Mengshu. But just as he was halfway through, he suddenly stopped. It seems he realized something was off. Unfortunately, it was already too late. At this moment, the male lead looked at him with a smile. Then he took his hand and gave him a forced toast. Bro, I'll leave this matter to you. In order for his apprentice to have the best retirement venue, the male lead had no choice but to lead Qi Mengshu step by step into his own bad trap. In the end, he lived up to everyone's expectations, successfully tricked into the opportunity of a breakup. When he realized he had been deceived, Zai Mengshu's expression immediately turned sour. If I had known, I would have hidden the moment I smelled something off. Instead, I came to reminisce. Clearly, I was just asking for trouble. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. In the end, What's it like to pick up a beautiful apprentice at the start? The male lead is even thinking about going straight for it. It's a nice thought, but it just can't be done. After all, I'm a proper content creator. Faced with the scolding from this master, how could I dare to argue? I can only keep flapping my wings with all my might. And he looked towards Yi Yuzhan's side. At this moment, he was running while dodging Xiao Qianlia's attacks. After a long period of wear and tear, Yi Yuzhan realized that this couldn't go on. He was about to exhaust the little energy he had just regained. Just when he was at his wit's end, a voice appeared in his mind. What are you afraid of? Another chain attack strikes. It directly breaks the tree, and Yi Yuzhan falls from the tree. But the voice just heard was clearly the protagonist's. When he looked up, he found the protagonist standing in mid-air, greeting him. When they landed on the ground, a barrier enveloped them. In an instant, Xiao Qianlian realized that the others were gone. Looking at the unharmed male lead, Yi Yuzhan began to have doubts. Why are you waiting here for that bird person? Did you handle it so quickly? Actually, the male lead didn't leave. He just sent a clone over. This clone was only meant for communication. I can only maintain the barrier for 10 minutes. I'll keep it brief. The first time we faced each other, he got lucky in one round. But now he's being completely dominated. Have you thought about why? You're too anxious. You're throwing yourself off balance. If your opponent blocks you, you'll be full of weaknesses. Of course, all that's left is to get beaten. After listening to the male lead's analysis, Yi Yuchan also realized he had indeed been too hasty. The situation on your side is unclear. I was worried, and before he could finish, the male lead grabbed his shoulder. You have to protect yourself first. That's the only way you'll have a chance to help me. Then he slowly helped Yi Yuchan up, telling him that the freak across from him mainly relies on his chains for damage. As long as you stay calm, I believe you can find his weakness. Then he patted his shoulder. The protagonist completely dissipated into the air. When Xiao Qianlian was at a loss, a voice called out to him. He turned to look behind him and found Yi Yuchan had unknowingly appeared in front of him again. Before he could react, Yi Yuchan started circling around him as his speed increased. After images even began to appear, Xiao Qianlei was completely dazzled. He couldn't tell which was real and which was fake. In the end, the more he looked, the more confused he became. His whole body fell into a dazed state. Seeing the timing was right, Yi Yuchan immediately approached him. She struck a heavy blow to Xiao Qianlian's chin. A few of his teeth were knocked out by Yi Yuchan. The force was so great that it sent him flying thousands of miles away. To allow Yi Yuchan to go for the trial, and without him realizing it, the male lead had to use both coaxing and deception. Only then did he manage to trick him into Qi Mengshu's territory. As for why he did this, that has to be explained from the moment Yi Yuchan defeated Xiao Qianlian. He originally thought it would end there. Just when he could finally rest, the male lead suddenly sent a message, saying, "You haven't won yet. Hurry up and run." At first, Yi Yuchan was puzzled. He was sure he had sent him flying with a palm strike. Why did he still need to run? Then the male lead explained, "That strike of yours wasn't strong enough." He's back on his feet again. "There's a patch of woods up ahead. You go hide there first. Wait for me to come get you." Then Yi Yuchan arrived at a dense forest. Without a care in the world, he just ran right in. However, he didn't notice the words above that read below Cave Ruins 7, items compete. What's it like to start off with a beautiful female disciple? Even the male lead is thinking about going directly for it. The idea is actually quite good, but it just can't be implemented. After all, I am a legitimate vlogger. The scene shifts. At this moment, Jiang Yuetian found Xiao Qianlian alien, who had been defeated by Yi Yuzhan. However, he did not find the male lead or Yi Yuzhan. But thinking about Yi Yuzhan being with the male lead, there shouldn't be any problems. Then he left without a care. Thinking about counting the money he made at the casino today, the scene shifts, arriving at Yuntian Academy. In the courtyard, the protagonist's disciples are busy with their own tasks. With a bang, the main gate was suddenly kicked open by a group of thugs. The leading little guy shouted loudly, "Listen, people inside. You are surrounded. Do not resist futilely. Put down your weapons immediately. Confess for leniency. Resist for harsh punishment." But what he said posed no threat at all to the male lead's disciples. Seeing this situation, little Gaga started getting cocky. "My people have you surrounded. You should be huddled together, trembling with fear by now." But the next second, the four of them glared menacingly at little Gaga. Under their overwhelming intimidation, little Gaga and his gang started to tremble. His tone immediately softened. "Big brothers and sisters, don't get angry. Just take out the warrant you have with you and show it to them. We are just here to ask something. Excuse me, does the person in the picture live here?" But because the drawing is so poorly done, even they couldn't recognize that the person in the picture is their master. After receiving a confirmed answer, they hurriedly walked out the door, saying, "We will take our leave now. Sorry for the disturbance." After finishing his words, he ran back home without looking back. He didn't even recognize Zhang Yuetian, who had just returned. When he got the wanted poster drifting in the wind and carefully examined it, what he never expected was, even the person on the wanted poster couldn't recognize himself. Qi Mengshu, who had half-immortal powers, was described by Yeyuchan as a salesman. This made Qi Mengshu furious, but there was nothing he could do about it. Who told him to be the male lead's disciple? Seeing that this issue couldn't be resolved for a long time, suddenly, a foot appeared and broke the deadlock. With one kick, he was sent directly into the trial tower. Then the trial tower slowly shrank. "I told you long ago, this girl is very wary. You don't look familiar to me either. You two have been lingering here for ages. Do you see him wavering?" Hearing this, Shiming was furious. "You still look familiar. Go look in the mirror. Besides, do you want me to just shove that girl inside like you did? I am a gentleman. I can't do something so rude." Hoping to successfully bring Yi Yu-chan into the room's refining tower, the male protagonist plans to start the next step of his plan. Then, the male protagonist transforms into Yi Yu-chan's former master, and Qi Mengshu turns into Yi Yu-chan's senior sister. What's it like to pick up a beautiful female disciple at the start? The male protagonist even thinks about going straight to the point. The idea is quite good, but it just can't be implemented. After all, I'm a professional blogger. In the end, the male lead had to drag him to get him to stop. After all, they still had important things to do. The scene shifts. At this moment, Yi Yu-chan is unconscious inside the tower, lying on the ground. As he slowly wakes up, he realizes he's inside a strange tower. And here, he felt his body was particularly heavy. He couldn't muster any strength at all. Seeing no other way, Yi Yu-chan had no choice but to use Ling Yun Force to clear his body. But just as he tried to activate it, he found that Ling Yun Force couldn't be used. Recalling what the strange man had just said, this trial tower was meant for secluded cultivation. It will suppress his soaring power. Only by passing the trial can he leave. While Yi Yu-chan was deep in thought, he noticed someone had entered. He immediately became alert and looked toward the doorway. He saw two figures slowly approaching him. As the smoke cleared, Yi Yu-chan finally saw their faces clearly. She didn't expect it to be her former master and senior sister. "How dare you, Yi Yu-chan? You don't even bow when you see your master? Where are your sex rules?" Facing the people who had hurt her before, Yi Yu-chan did not show them any kindness. "Shameless hypocrite. When you dug out my spiritual root, did you forget I was your disciple? Now it's moral coercion. Let me pay my respects to you. Do you deserve such an attitude from him?" The pretended mentor immediately warns him. "Yi Yu-chan, you must not be disrespectful to your master. Aren't you going to apologize quickly?" However, Yi Yu-chan did not compromise. He even said he wanted him to apologize. "Stop dreaming. To those who have hurt her, Yi Yu-chan usually doesn't show a friendly face. After all, she almost died back then. If the male lead hadn't discovered it in time, but now isn't the time for him to dwell on that. He should first deal with the current situation." Then, Yi Yu-chan noticed several bows and arrows hanging on the wall behind her. The use of force is prohibited inside this trial tower, so the best choice is a weapon. He then jumped back a few steps. He picked up the bow and arrows from the wall and prepared to shoot at them, because Yi Yu-chan wanted to take the initiative. This time he didn't want to avoid it anymore. With a whoosh, Yi Yu-chan released his grip on the bowstring without hesitation. The sharp arrowhead shot straight toward his former master. This shows that Yi Yu-chan is no longer who he used to be. But at this critical moment, the three flying swords were blocked by Qi Mengshu, disguised as a Liang clansman. "How long have you been away from the sect? Have you already forgotten your place? You can't even get past your senior sister. Do you still want to challenge your master?" In the face of his warning, Yi Yu-chan didn't take it to heart. She simply remarked that those three strikes just now were merely a warm-up. Then she began to fade away. Picking up her bow and arrows, she launched an attack on them. Her speed was so fast that there were already 2 after images. Immediately after, she kept leaping back and forth within the tower, centering on the 2 of them. They launched flying swords accordingly, forming a 360-degree sword formation without any blind spots, and the 2 inside the sword formation could only keep dodging the incoming swords. He whispered, "It would be better if she were petite and cute like Yi Yu-chan." Even though he whispered, Yi Yu-chan still heard him. Unexpectedly, the next second, she lifted her own skirt. At first, the male lead and the others didn't know what Yi Yu-chan was doing until they saw that under her skirt, it was filled with gunpowder. She was practically a walking powder keg. Then they realized Yi Yu-chan had secretly stashed so much explosives behind their backs. What's it like to pick up a beautiful apprentice right at the start? The male lead even thought about going straight to he. Not a bad idea, actually. But it just can't be done. After all, I'm a legitimate content creator. Then he tied explosives to the arrows. He drew his bow and shot them at the group. Whoosh! 3 arrows with explosives flew straight out. When the arrows hit them, they immediately exploded. When the smoke cleared, it revealed that the 2 of them had already fallen at Yi Yu-chan's feet. Looking at the 2 lying on the ground, Yi Yu-chan finally felt a sense of relief. At that moment, a voice appeared in Yi Yu-chan's mind, drawing his attention. The outcome is decided. The victor is asked to remove the loser's spiritual root. After saying this, a dagger appeared in front of Yi Yu-chan as proof of passing the trial. Otherwise, the next stage cannot be unlocked. What do you think Yi Yu-chan will choose? Will he take their spiritual roots or give up the right to pass? If you were given a chance, if you had the chance to eliminate those who once hurt you, would you hesitate or take them out without a second thought, or would you choose to let it go? At this moment, Yi Yu-chan trembles as she takes the dagger before her, but inside, she's conflicted. Will she really become like them? For now, all it would take is one strike. They would understand the pain they felt at that time. But just as he was about to stab down, he suddenly stopped. At this moment, Yi Yu-chan realized he couldn't do this. Because he had promised the male lead to let go of hatred, he couldn't go back on his word. If he were to dig out the spiritual roots of these 2, his senior brothers and sisters would be disappointed in him. So he decided to let them go, and to let go of the hatred in his heart. In the end, Yi Yu-chan chose to give up. He gave up the chance to clear the trial. Seeing that he couldn't clear it, he could only wait here for the male lead to appear until he brought him out of the trial platform. But he never expected that. The trial tower actually indicated that he successfully passed the test and even received a martial technique as a reward. Receiving the technique, he immediately became happy. He didn't expect that this unintended action would clear the stage. It turns out that in this trial tower, victory isn't the key, but rather how you treat your defeated opponent. That is the true essence of the trial. Then the notification from the trial tower arrived again. The teleportation is about to begin. Please, challengers, get ready. You are about to head to the second level. This is so sudden. Yi Yu-chan was still trying to figure out what was going on with the 2 people on the ground, but unexpectedly, with a whoosh, he was teleported to the second level of the trial tower. At this moment, the 2 people lying on the ground returned to their original forms, but the male lead's hand was in a strange place. Then, using some force, the male lead stood up, but Chi Mengshu was crushed by him, spitting out blood. Enraged, Chi Mengshu got up and cursed the male lead's whole family, but the male lead had no time to respond. He said he had to follow up and check. The scene changed after that. Inside the second floor of the Heartbreak Tower, lightning was striking everywhere, and Yi Yu-chan, who was in the midst of it, kept dodging. But for some reason, the lightning seemed to only target him. In the end, he couldn't avoid it and was struck by the lightning from a tree thief. The impact was so strong it blew Yi Yu-chan's clothes apart. The scene was nothing short of iconic, and coincidentally, this scene was clearly witnessed by the 2 protagonists who just arrived. Then, the male lead directly punched Chi Mengshu. He told him to close his eyes immediately and not to look. He even said, "Only I can look at my apprentice." Facing the utterly shameless male lead, Chi Mengshu cursed him out, but it didn't work on him at all. But later, the male lead thought for a moment. It seems like the 7 dream technique isn't very useful at this level. Right after that, the protagonist directly sent him out of the trial tower. He thought the protagonist saw him as a brother, but the protagonist treated him like a tool. Who would have thought? The protagonist turned out to be so shameless, just to hog the benefits for himself. He heartlessly sent the 7 Dream Tree out of the trial tower. What's it like to pick up a beautiful disciple at the start? The protagonist even thought about getting intimate right away. The idea isn't bad at all, but it just can't be done. After all, I'm a proper content creator. After sending him away, the protagonist stands aside watching Yi Yu-chan get struck by lightning. Seeing that she can't hold on any longer, Yi Yu-chan turned around and surprisingly found a dome at the center. With no other option, he decided to take a gamble. He He quickly ran toward the dome, but what he didn't expect was this dome was the key to generating the lightning strikes. Yi Yuchan actually hid inside it. The next scene was predictable. Countless lightning bolts struck Yi Yuchan inside the dome. The power is immense. It blew away all of his remaining clothes. It even released the sealed monster within him. At this moment, inside the dome, dark energy continuously radiates outward. The protagonist couldn't understand why it escaped again. It was like an endless, annoying plaster. It just wouldn't stop. He's almost driving me crazy. Controlled by the demon, Yi Yuchan slowly crawled out from the top. Long time no see, old turtle. I told you I would definitely come back. Regarding his appearance, the male lead also started to take things seriously. Little did he know, as soon as he landed, he immediately fired a shot at the male lead. Then he forcefully threw out a wave ball straight towards the male lead. The male lead wasn't idle either. He took out a guqin from his spatial ring. Then he sat down on the ground. He placed the guqin on his lap. I don't want to see you right now. Get lost back immediately. Then the right hand slightly raised, gently plucking the strings. A move from Gunarala. The troll from the troll zone charged straight ahead. When the two forces collided, a powerful force erupted with a bang. Now the monster started to panic. It hurriedly shouted, "You old bastard." The male lead won't let him off easily for tricking him again. You only have two choices now. One is to continue being tricked by me. The other is to roll back into the formation and stay there. But the demon didn't heed the male lead's words. It seemed to want to struggle a bit longer. At this moment, the demon within Yi and Chan was stirring restlessly. Please summon the god as you wish, God-man. Do you think I'm still the same as before? You still want me to leave? You didn't even look at the door. Old man, if I don't knock your grandson down today. He thought he could be safe inside the Night Rain Cicada. Little did he know, the male lead's avatar had already entered the Night Rain Cicada, and it even mocked him for looking so foolish. No wonder the others don't want to play with you. For a moment, he started to doubt his appearance. Then he looked at himself in the mirror, but he didn't think he looked ugly at all. But then he thought, this is inside Yi Yuchan, who was just talking to him. By the time he realized, it was too late. He saw a large hand pressing down on him. It was a simple slap. He directly sent him into the formation. After sealing him within the array, the large hand then dissipated. At this moment, the male protagonist stretched lazily atop the magic creature within the formation. You can do whatever you want. The protagonist treats you like a fool. Even though the monster hiding inside Night Rain Cicada was talking tough and showing an arrogant expression, the protagonist could still rub the monster's face into the ground, and the monster couldn't do anything about it. Let's see how arrogant it is now. At this moment, the monster beneath the protagonist's feet keeps begging for mercy. This looks a bit smarter than how it was acting earlier, and it immediately agrees with the protagonist. It's a pity the male lead isn't buying it. Just use your brain a little next time. Stop showing off for no reason. I'll spare your life. Before leaving, the monster politely sent the male lead off. Take care, sir. Feel free to drop by anytime. Afterward, Yi Yuchan regained her calm. He fell asleep, watching the monsters appear again and again. The protagonist felt he needed to hurry to Jidianyu. Otherwise, that thing might come out and hurt Yi Yuchan again. What's it like to pick up a beautiful disciple at the start? The protagonist even thought of getting frisky. The idea wasn't bad, but it just couldn't be carried out. After all, I am a legitimate vlogger. Then, the male lead's fingers kept wandering over Yi Yuchan's body, and he was continuously transmitting energy into him. After this body tempering, the male lead found that his meridians were still severely blocked. He needed to take this opportunity to clear them. However, what he didn't expect was that the male lead actually discovered that the lightning ball had run out on its own. This guy is quite rare, but using him to relax the muscles works better than silver needles. Then, the male lead glared at him fiercely, told him to come over to his side. Regardless of the consequences, the male lead directly started rubbing back and forth. It scared him so much that he hurriedly explained that it was the 7 techniques. That bastard makes me chop anyone I see. As a worker, I can't go against my boss's orders. But the male lead isn't doing this for that reason. He directly orders him to shut up. Then he brings him in front of Yi Yuchan. He mentions the Su Weimei that I marked on him. At this moment, the Thunderbolt group in the Devil's Grasp immediately starts to flatter him. This is simply a work of art that astonishes heaven and terrifies ghosts. In response to his praise, the male lead does not appreciate it. Instead, he directly orders the Raiden gang to strike lightning at the acupoints he called out. The Raiden gang, receiving the order, does not dare to be negligent. They use all their strength to unleash several bolts of lightning. Then, another round of retaliation ensues. In the end, only a few stubborn pieces of fabric remain. The lightning kept striking Yukin's meridians. At this moment, his veins began to bulge. It looked like he was about to burst. But with the protagonist here, there was no way Yukin would be in danger. Then, the protagonist once again began to play the guqin. The melodious tune seemed to come alive, continuously nourishing Yukin's body. His expression gradually became calm. In the end, he showed a look of enjoyment. Seeing Yi Yi Yuchan's change, the male lead finally felt at ease. Just a moment ago, he had kicked her out of the trial tower to have it all to himself. But in the next moment, he eagerly ran back to her because he wanted to ask for her help. Shameless to this extent. There's really no one like that. If it weren't for Chi Mengshu being unable to defeat the male lead, she would have definitely taken him down. And the male lead is here to imagine that after this trial ends, he will release Yi Yuchan. But for the principled Chi Mengshu, that's simply impossible. Every trial participant must pass the 81 challenges to get out. However, he hadn't finished speaking. He suddenly felt short of breath, accompanied by coughing. Without thinking too much, it must be the male protagonist's doing. At that moment, Chi Mengshu was holding his throat, showing a look of discomfort. The male lead doesn't seem to care about the situation he's facing. After all, Chi Mengshu is in this state because his true form is in the male lead's hands. Whatever the male lead wants him to do, he has to do. Then, the male lead grabs him by the neck and squeezes his head. Unable to bear the torture, Chi Mengshu has no choice but to agree to the male lead's request. The scene shifts to Yi Yuchan, groggily waking up inside the Tower of Heartbreak. When looking around, he found that the lightning on this level had completely vanished. His clothes had also been renewed. Even his wounds had mysteriously healed completely. But no matter how hard Yi Yuchan tried to recall, he couldn't remember who had helped him. In the end, he gave up on this thought and prepared to head to the next level. However, as he just looked up, he saw the furious Chi Mengshu say to him, "You passed the second trial. Hurry up and leave this place." "Did I pass just by getting struck by lightning? I haven't done anything yet. Weren't there supposed to be 3 trials?" Faced with Yi Yuchan's doubt, Chi Mengshu couldn't be bothered to respond. "I'm the master of the Trial Star Tower. I do whatever I want. Now I'm tired. I want to sleep, so I cancelled the 3rd challenge." After saying that, he lifted his leg, intending to kick him out of the trial tower like the main character. But unexpectedly, Yi Yuchan hugged his leg, pitifully saying, "You haven't given me the reward for passing yet. You gave it for the first challenge. You're not thinking of playing tricks this time, are you?" Regarding Yi Yuchan's actions, Chi Mengshu felt that these two, master and disciple, were truly difficult to deal with. Then she turned and said, "Why not try using your spiritual energy to find out?" At first, Yi Yuchan looked puzzled. When he focused his energy, he discovered that his spiritual energy contained lightning effects. Meanwhile, Chi Mengshu explained to him, "This is the reward for the 2nd layer. Now you have an elemental constitution, the little thunder body." Hearing this, Yi Yuchan's pupils dilated. She could hardly believe it. After all, this is the same elemental physique as the 21st extreme. It's something countless people dream of. Yuchan was lifted by him into the air. "How about I fight 300 rounds with you? What do you think? But don't get too happy too soon. With your current cultivation level, even if you possess elemental constitution, you're still miles away from the strength of level 21. However, upon hearing this, Yi Yuchan wasn't discouraged. Instead, he became more determined in his resolve to train. After that, he happily left the trial tower, completely unaware of the male lead silently watching over him. Having a well-connected master really makes a difference. Others spend their whole lives unable to enter the trial tower, but Yi Yuchan got in with ease. And he even obtained the little thunder physique inside. That's the same elemental constitution as the 21 extremes. At this very moment, Yi Yuchan can't wait to test its power. You can see him enter the forest, squatting down, preparing to gather strength. Then with a swoosh, he leaped above the forest. Even Yi Yuchan couldn't believe he could jump that high. Now, in midair, he prepared to test the small thunder skybody he had acquired to see how much its power had changed. Then, it was time for his experiment. Several energy balls hurtled toward the ground. Seeing this scene, Chi Mengshu, who was on the ground, cursed out loud, "You damn girl, stop! 7th Master, I'm not dead yet. You dare blow up my house openly? Do you want a beating?" The male lead, standing nearby, immediately patted him on the shoulder and said, "This tree, you're already so old. Just don't argue with the younger generation. It's not good for your health." In the end, the male lead agreed. He let his disciple come over and help him plant some good seedlings. He wouldn't pursue Yi Yuchan's recklessness. With the male lead's assurance, Chi Mengshu turned around and said he was tired. Time to go back into hibernation. But that's not how he usually is. The main character immediately felt something strange. Then he asked what was going on. Chi Mengshu only gave a vague response. He had this feeling that someone out there was causing trouble for the 21st level system. But as for their strength, the main character didn't think they'd be in such a sorry state. However, Chi Mengshu felt that as long as the male lead was there, he had already completely overshadowed them. The male lead, hearing this, thought the same. There was simply no way to have a proper conversation with him. Chi Mengshu could only wave goodbye to him in disappointment. "Hopefully, the next time we meet, you'll still be alive and well." After he had walked away, he slowly calmed down. He raised his clenched fist, then looked at his own body in his hand. He wondered if they could meet alive when the time comes. The scene changes. At this moment, Yi Yuchan happily walked out of the woods and heard the male lead calling her name. When she looked into the distance, they spotted his figure. At this moment, the male lead was leisurely lying on a rock and said, it seems the treasure you got from the Shurexin Tower has satisfied you, hasn't it? As soon as he said this, Yi Yu-chan was a bit surprised. How did he know that I had entered the Shurexin Tower? The male lead then explained to him that everything along the way had been carefully arranged by him, so he knew every detail of his actions. But no matter how much the male lead explained, he still had some doubts. After all, Kim Engshu is someone from the 21-episode world. Seeing that Yi Yu-chan still didn't believe him, the male lead had no choice but to recount everything he'd experienced. Only then did he start believing the male lead, and the male lead took the opportunity to get a little handsy. He placed his hand on his shoulder. With a strong pull, Yi Yu-chan found himself hanging in midair. "Do you want me to spar with you for 300 rounds? What do you think?" But Yi Yu-chan wasn't that foolish. He directly slapped away the male lead's hands. He said, "I'm not that stupid. Practicing with you would be like handing over my life for free." As soon as he gets a chance, the male lead tries to take advantage of Yi Yu-chan. Well, it's just that he's a natural pervert. It's written all over him. But Yi Yu-chan doesn't fall for it at all. She immediately rejects his sparring idea. Seeing his plan fail, the male lead has no choice but to look around for a high-level magical beast. Then, centered on the male protagonist, his aura kept spreading outward, expanding to the point of covering the entire forest, marking the start of the hunt. Finally, the male protagonist's pupils dilated, as if he had discovered something interesting. Then he smiled slightly, and said, "It's decided, it's him." The scene shifts to the edge of a cliff, where four figures are talking about something. As the view zooms in, three of them are trying to persuade the girl to stop resisting in vain. They tell her to go back with them quietly, but the girl seems to have no goodwill toward them. Through gritted teeth, she says, "Stop calling me junior sister. Keep talking and I'll cut out your tongue to feed the fish." Seeing the girl still being stubborn, they had no choice but to keep persuading her. Think about it, Senior Zhang is handsome, and he's at the Lingtai cultivation level. He even owns the Leitian casino. He's wealthy and powerful. Isn't that great? But the girl got even angrier upon hearing this. "Since you think that bastard Zhong Tianying is so great, then go marry him. I won't wade into this mess." After saying that, he raised his greatsword and charged at them. He was determined to carve a bloody path out. The ferocity of the attack caught them off guard. One of them was even blasted away by Zhang Ruoxue. "Beat me, or else tie me up again, or get out of my way. Don't block me, and besides, I, Zhang Ruoxue, already have someone I'm destined to be with. In this life, I will marry no one but him." The giant standing there is none other than Yi Yu-chan, after growing big. Have you ever seen an attacking maid? Now you've got one in front of you. As soon as those words were said, the atmosphere became awkward. She had only been out of the sect for a few days. How could she have time to get to know her marriage partner? Even when exposed, Zhang Ruoxue remained stubborn. In this deadlock, the male lead saw everything clearly from above. Then, in the next moment, he came to Zhang Ruoxue's side. He pulled him into his embrace. Taking the opportunity, he cast a binding spell on him. This made Zhang Ruoxue remain still in his arms. Then he struck an international friendly pose for the little gagas. It's already 2022. How can there still be such a forced marriage act? And facing the inexplicably intrusive male lead, these little brats won't show him any mercy. In an instant, they draw their swords and point. "Who's this guy? He even dares to meddle in the affairs of our Thunderstorm gang." In response to their doubts, the protagonist seizes the moment, claiming he's Zhang Ruoxue's fiancé. But Zhang Ruoxue doesn't even know him at all. "I advise you to not narrow your path. If you leave now, we'll pretend we never met. I don't know anything about you and junior sister. Otherwise, you'll be opposing the entire Thunderstorm sect." Hearing this, the male lead pretended to look innocent. He said, "Are you threatening me?" Then he shouted loudly behind them, "Big sis, come quick. Someone's bullying your little brother." Right after, from the woods behind them, there was a faint sound of a giant walking. A huge hand parted the branches in front of them, and the massive figure overshadowed their tiny bodies. Standing before them now was none other than the giantized Yi Yu-chan. "Have you ever seen an attacking maid? Now there's one right in front of you." Just as Xiao Gaga was utterly shocked, the male lead picked up Zhang Ruoxue and leaped up. He jumped straight onto Yi Yu's deadly weapon. Though they were supposed to use the giant inflatable technique to scare Xiao Gaga, what's up with the male lead jumping onto her chest weapon? Faced with the protagonist's secretive actions, Yi Yu-chan was a bit angry, but to someone as thick-skinned as the protagonist, he just ignored it directly. Looking at the giant in front of him, little Gaga also felt a bit troubled. After all, the size difference was a bit too big. There was no way around it. They had no choice but to use their life-saving tools to face the giant Yi Yu-chan, and this slight movement also made the male protagonist realize something was wrong. He then specifically reminded Yi Yu-chan to be careful. "Get ready with the secret technique I just taught you." Once they finished communicating, the little attackers charged forward in a swarm, launching an assault on Yi Yu-chan. Just as the male protagonist had predicted, they immediately used their life-saving artifacts. But Yi Yu-chan did not panic. Instead, he focused on channeling his power into his fists. The scene was truly breathtaking. In the end, Yi Yu-chan had the upper hand. With one punch, he sent them flying. At this moment, the little gagas, who were sent flying, collapsed on the ground. Screams echo all around. One of the little guys quickly realizes something is wrong. He immediately pulls out the illusion their master had prepared in advance. With a whoosh, a red beam shoots out from the illusion. Then, a phantom even bigger than Yi Yu-chan appears in front of the protagonist. The pressure from it makes Yi Yu-chan unsteady on her feet. She falls to the ground. The male lead, who was sitting on Yi Yu-chan's weapon, also bounced up. Who are you to dare harm a disciple of the Lei Yu sect? He felt like he couldn't beat this old man. Yi Yu-chan asked the male lead to deal with him. After getting the male lead's consent, Yi Yu-chan began to rapidly shrink at a visible speed, until returning to her original size. Watching Yi Yu-chan's maneuver, the old man was a bit surprised, but the male lead didn't care much about that. He directly confronted him, asking if today's youth no longer value martial ethics. When they lose a fight, they just call their parents. Well, this parent also has to step in and get involved. Faced with the male lead's arrogance, the old man seemed to recognize him as the one with a bounty from the Gong family. But he hadn't finished speaking. Then it exploded with a loud bang in the air, scattered in the atmosphere. It turned out that the male lead pulled out a rocket launcher and fired it at him while he was talking. Can you believe it? Someone actually dared to block the male lead's sect. The key is that there are quite a few of them, surrounded by a large group of people with no way to escape. Among them are the little minions of Lei Yu Zone from the casino. Then he pulled Yi Yu into his arms and said, "Didn't you hear someone was targeting Zhang Ruoxue? Why are you getting involved in other people's private matters?" And the group from the Gong family, to which Gong Xingqian, who was killed by the male lead, belonged. Lastly, there's the Tianbei Valley, which was completely turned upside down by the male lead. But only some juniors came. The three groups didn't attack right away. They were outside discussing who should make the first move. After all, the male lead's rocket launcher is no joke. Just when they were struggling to reach a conclusion, the male lead kicked open his front door. Then he strode up to them. This was truly the height of arrogance. Not only that, as soon as the male lead spoke, he started provoking that bunch of cowards. "What are you all doing in front of my door? You've been wasting time and haven't reached any agreement. Honestly, I advise you all to just shut up and ascend right here." What's even more exaggerated is, the male lead completely looks down on their abilities. He even thinks he can single-handedly take down everyone present. Unfortunately, just as the male lead was about to make a move, he was pulled inside by Yi Yu-chan, who was hiding behind the door. Then, with a bang, the door was shut by Yi Yu-chan. This dramatic performance left them somewhat bewildered. At this moment in Yuntian Academy, Yi Yu-chan began to criticize the male lead's behavior as somewhat crazy. However, the male lead was indifferent to this. He even thought that the male lead's actions would be like striking a rock with an egg. This instantly labeled the male lead as a weakling. Then he reassured the male lead not to force himself. It was understandable if he couldn't win. Right now we need to think of a way. We can't go in hard. During their conversation, a figure streaked past them. At first, they couldn't see what it was. They only knew something had zipped by. It wasn't until they reacted and looked toward the door that they realized it was Zhang Ruoxue, armed. Then he quickly arrived at the front gate. Holding a giant sword, he stood alone before them. Seeing that the newcomer was his fiancée, Zhong Tianying's expression immediately darkened. He said to her, "You've finally come out, Ruoxue, junior sister." However, Zhang Ruoxue ignored him and stood straight at the entrance, standing tall like a god of war. Seeing another person rushing to their death, Yi Yu-chan quickly ran to stop them, but was pulled back by the protagonist. Then he held Yi Yu-chan in his arms and said, "Didn't you hear? They're all coming for Zhang Ruoxue. Why are you getting involved in their personal matters?" Facing the protagonist's irrational thinking, Yi Yu-chan tried hard to stop him. He even wanted to bring Zhang Ruoxue back to hang out with everyone. No matter how the male lead explained, his weak image in Yi Yu-chan's mind couldn't be changed. There was nothing he could do. He had to let his disciple explain to Yi Yu-chan, and they eagerly ran over. Thinking the male lead was going to assign them a headcount technique, little did they know what was in Yi Yu-chan's mind. The protagonist turns out to be a worthless existence. No matter how he explains, the weakling image of him in Yi Yu-chan's mind probably can't be changed. So he decides to let his disciple prove that he's actually very strong. But Yi Yu-chan still doesn't understand what they mean. Are they planning to start a fight with those people outside? The scene shifts. At this moment, outside the gate, Zhang Ruoxue shouts loudly, "You bunch of trash. Everyone, listen up. I escaped from the marriage myself. I was the one who hurt the person. If there's an issue, come at me. Don't involve the innocent." Regarding the male lead's scolding, Yi Yu-chan feels a bit guilty. "Wasn't it you who asked me to liven things up? Are you not aware of my current bomb control skills?" It's just a pity that Zhang Ruoxue thought it was too simple, because they never intended to let the protagonist and his group go. He was just an extra obstacle. Upon hearing this, Zhang Ruoxue sneered. Then, he revealed a shocking secret. The reason why the Thunderstorm sect wanted to capture him was because he was just their pawn for some sacrificial ritual. When Zhang Ruoxue heard this news, she fled. She swore never to return to the sect. As soon as these words were spoken, the people around started whispering. Everyone was criticizing Lei Yuzong for using evil techniques. Even Zhong Tianying didn't expect him to reveal this secret in public. Meanwhile, the male protagonist at Yuntian Academy, hearing about the Hawan technique, instantly made his expression darken. He never expected that in the male protagonist's past there was a memory of being hurt by the Hawan technique. Back then, it seemed he didn't spare anyone involved in the matter. You knew and didn't report it, making you all accomplices. Damn, at this very moment, the male lead's rage is ignited once again. Perhaps another massacre is about to unfold. Yet the group outside the door is completely unaware of the looming danger, still fixated on Zhang Ruoxue, refusing to back down, swearing never to regret it. But from head to toe, from the inside out, you're all. What right do you have, as a member of the Thunderstorm sect, to not return to the sect? Now is the time for you to repay the Thunderstorm sect. Seeing that the Thunderstorm sect had no intention of letting him go, he thought, Zhang Ruoxue decided to give everything back to them. Then he picked up his giant sword and swung it in his direction. Blood splattered everywhere on the spot. The surrounding onlookers were also shocked. This was completely unexpected. Zhang Ruoxue actually swung his sword and severed his own left hand. Not only that, he also threw the giant sword at Zhong Tianying. After all, it was also the Lei sect's magical weapon. The giant sword landed right in front of Zhong Tianying. It scared him into a shiver. In the end, Zhang Ruoxue did it to repay his debt to the Lei sect. He even crippled his own cultivation in person. The spectators went from initial shock to now admiring his courage. After this farce, the reputation of the Thunderstorm sect has completely collapsed. Since Zhang Ruoxue no longer has any value, the sect leader of the Thunderstorm sect labeled her as a demoness, intending to kill her in public to restore the sect's honor. Everyone has long buried memories. Even the protagonist is no exception. He watched helplessly as his senior sister died tragically in front of him. The only thing he could do for her was kill all the accomplices. This time, his chance has come. The protagonist can finally settle things with them. At this moment, the leader of the Lei sect, who was about to deliver the final blow to Zhang Ruoxue, suddenly found his Lingyuan power dissipating for some unknown reason, and his own voice couldn't come out. Meanwhile, the unconscious Zhang Ruoxue, who lost an arm, was caught by someone. That person also healed his wound. It turns out it was the male lead all along. As they say, kids shouldn't fight at the school gate, or else, you'll get in trouble. And for those who speak rudely, your punishment is a little silence. Looking at Zhang Ruoxue in his hands, the male lead can't help but admire his courage. Then he calls Yi Yuchan over to help him down, because it's time for the male lead to take the stage. After all, this is his old grudge with the Hahuan sect. At this moment, Yi Yuchan successfully carries the dying Zhang Ruoxue inside, bringing him to his senior sister, with him barely clinging to life. But as the senior brother, Bu Wangjun was a bit confused. Just now, the male lead said to let them handle Xiao Gaga. Why did he rush in himself now? Faced with his disciples' doubts, the male lead gave this explanation. I was getting antsy. So the practical lesson turned into on-site teaching. Xiao Yuchan is here to make a couple of thunder strikes for fun. Regarding the male lead's strange request, Yi Yuchan did not refuse. She just thought he was only messing around with flashy things. Then, 2 bolts of lightning struck the door. It seems Yi Yuchan wanted to use thunder to shatter the darkness. Seeing 2 giant craters suddenly appear in front of his house, the hero's heart is like tens of thousands of grass and mud horses galloping past. You little brat. Who told you to dig in front of our door? Do you know how expensive it is to fix the land? Do you know how exhausting it is for me to supervise the little ones planting trees? Facing the male lead scolding, Yi Yuchan felt a bit guilty. Wasn't it you who asked me to thunder for fun? Don't you have a sense of my current empty thunder skills? But halfway through, his expression changed. It seemed like he discovered something incredible. He then shouted loudly, "Stop cursing, quick! Look behind you." To Yi Yuchan's anxious reaction, the male lead didn't care. He simply turned his head to look behind. A gigantic 5-clawed golden dragon appeared in front of him. The other's intimidation was truly formidable. You fell for the trap. Inside the dragon's belly. Blah blah blah. Who knows what you're doing? Then the dragon soared into the sky, accompanied by a dragon's roar. The scene made Yi Yuchan a bit panicked. Could it be that he was going to be defeated? Did the team get wiped out? But once he calms down and thinks about it, from the past till now, the protagonist has never failed. This time, there shouldn't be any problem either. Just using an ordinary giant spirit talisman is enough to merge everyone's spirit power together, forming such a powerful dragon force. Zhong Tian started constantly flattering the Gong family elder to curry favor with the Gong family. But what he was really thinking was how he could enjoy Zhang Ruoxue tonight. Do you think this giant dragon is badass? But in the protagonist's eyes, it's nothing, because by this time, the protagonist had already planted explosives in its belly. This move shocked Yi Yuchan, but Lin Yuan had already gotten used to it. Right after, the male protagonist detonated the explosives. The entire dragon was blown to pieces, and the male protagonist jumped out from inside the dragon. A perfect landing. So, did you learn all the moves just now? You fell for it. Inside the dragon's belly. Blah blah blah. Who knows what you're doing? Meanwhile, senior brother Gu Wangjun had the look of someone giving an official speech. He explained the entire process the male lead went through. The others nearby also agreed, saying senior brother was right. They had all learned from this lesson. Only Yayuchan was completely lost. With his abilities, there's no way he could understand the protagonist's moves. The dragon was defeated by the protagonist in one strike. Yet, the Gong family remains stubborn. They still want to stir up trouble. Meanwhile, Zhong Tianying is already scared out of his wits, but Gong Jia still wants to continue, so he can only clap and cheer from the side. Then, all the little Gagas retreat together. Only the three leaders were left, facing their renewed attack. The male protagonist transformed. He began muttering, "Since you young ones refuse to reason, now you even team up to deal with me. I guess I'll have to teach you how to behave again. You brats, let's have a live demonstration. Keep your little eyes wide open and watch carefully. Watch closely." But the male lead realizes they've already run to the rest table, snacking on sunflower seeds while cheering him on. Looking at them like that, it doesn't seem like they're his students at all. It's more like he's performing live for them. But now's not the time to teach them a lesson, because the protagonist is already surrounded by the little goons. Even though they're no use to him at all, they still have to give it a try. Then, the formation surrounding the protagonist rises from the ground. It looks quite impressive, but in the protagonist's eyes, they're just 5 little flowers. While the protagonist keeps rambling on, the 5 people maintaining the formation suddenly disappeared. Faced with this situation, the male lead remained calm. He even leisurely gave them a name. Then the male lead observed the formation. He found they were doing quite well. However, their assault quickly began. Suddenly, several meteors fell on the male lead's head. Although it looks pretty badass, the protagonist easily dodges it. Seeing that they only ambush from the shadows, the protagonist has to use a bit of power to force them out. He kicks the previously frozen meteor into different corners, and the meteor just happens to hit the little ones maintaining the formation, making them cough up blood. The formation trapping the protagonist shatters completely. Looks like they're not that great either. Such drastic ups and downs in the situation. Zhong Tianying feels like a clown. The main character is usually merciful. He never kills. At most, he might search their souls or something. Whether they can last till the end depends on themselves. Facing the male lead's threat, Xiao Gaga was utterly terrified. He hurriedly called out to the hidden Ninth Elder. Upon hearing the term Ninth Elder, the male lead's expression immediately darkened. Someone as ethereal as I am. How could I be tainted by such filthy things as the Hahuan technique? Before the protagonist could continue asking about the refining process, the sky suddenly darkened, and the air was filled with the smell of corrosion. What the protagonist didn't expect was that before he could even use the soul-searching technique, the old schemer who taught the Hahuan technique appeared on his own. At that moment, an old man stepped out from the crowd, while the surrounding minions were so terrified of the old man that they kept retreating. This kid is quite arrogant. He even dares to threaten the life of the leader of the Thunder Rain sect. After saying this, he raised his hand and unleashed the soul-binding lock towards the male lead. In the face of his attack, the male lead did not dodge. He stood still, bound by the servant spirit. Seeing the male lead hit by Elder Joe's skill, the fallen Zyagaga began to mock him. But for their confident demeanor, the male lead couldn't help but laugh. In his eyes, these few worthless, shabby chains were nothing. The male lead simply shattered the spirit lock with ease. At this moment, the male lead darkened his face and said to them, "Who do you worthless scum think you are looking down on? Since you are so eager to die, then I shall fulfill your wish." Immediately, the old man's eyes emitted a green light. It looked somewhat eerie. Soon after, the ground began to crack. Rubble and soil began to float into the air. The old man paid no attention to the lives of the small gaggas around him. Even the ground they were standing on started to rise. Suddenly, a massive peak shot up from the ground. Several chains flew out from inside, once again binding the protagonist, this time locking his limbs tightly and trapping him at the top, with terrifying souls seeping out below. You think it's over? Then you're wrong. Countless souls then crazily rushed at the protagonist. Unfortunately, this move didn't cause any harm to the male lead. Any soul that gets close to him would be instantly destroyed. The souls quickly distanced themselves from the male lead, afraid they'd be doomed if they got any closer. Then, the male lead broke free and leaped to the top. Countless souls fled upon seeing this. Serves you right for following that old vulture outside. The real problem is facing me. I can only say you all are out of luck. At this moment, the old man standing outside the cauldron seemed to realize that there was no movement inside. He had thought that the male lead had been completely devoured by the vengeful spirits. He just thought it was some fool. Little did he know that before he could react, a fist landed squarely on his old face. The one who threw this punch was none other than the male lead, who had escaped the constraints of the cauldron. Not only that, the protagonist even broke all his limbs. His moves were fast, precise, and ruthless. Finally, he delivered an uppercut. A perfect ending. The old man flew into the air with a swoosh. The protagonist gave him a free trip to the sky. To this day, the old man still can't figure out when the protagonist appeared, and he came out completely unscathed. As for the protagonist being the perfect nourishment, at first, he thought he was extremely lucky. Then he started to become manic. After all, He had been stuck in the infant tribulation for so many years and finally found a suitable way to break through. In his eyes, this was practically heaven's help as he laughed manically. Suddenly, with a whoosh, the person disappeared right under the male lead's feet. This was completely unexpected for the male lead. After all, teleportation artifacts are quite rare in the world. Then, a scream erupted from behind the male lead. When the male lead turned to look, he found that the little ones who had just surrounded him were being sucked in. Screams were echoing one after another. In the end, all the little creatures were gathered by the old man. He was absorbing their spiritual energy from above. In an instant, the limbs that the protagonist had just broken were fully restored. Absorb, drain all this low-level vitality. This is the honor for you low-level cultivators. Once I recover my strength, I'll capture that boy for quantification. Then I'll be able to break through in one go. Because he completely agreed with the idea, the male lead fully supported it. Unfortunately, he encountered the male lead. Someone as ethereal as I am. How could I be refined by such a filthy thing as the Hahuan technique? It just so happens that I know a graceful and stylish way. Let me demonstrate with you first. After you've experienced it yourself, you can try to refine me. Suddenly, a blue phantom appeared at the old man's feet. Even he was somewhat at a loss. Are you talking about that unparalleled master, Wendy, who can do anything? The charming and talented one, who is known for his remarkable skills. Immediately, the phantom suddenly opened its massive mouth. It swallowed the old man whole. I don't know how long it passed. The old man suddenly opened his eyes. He finds himself in an unfamiliar place, with his limbs and head bound. The protagonist sits in front of him, quietly waiting for him to wake up. Seeing the old man has woken up, the protagonist simply gestures with his finger, and he moves toward the protagonist. The protagonist seems like the king ruling this place. Are you comfortable here with me? You're at death's door, yet you can still sleep so soundly. Does being chained up make you feel that good? Mocking the old man, he seems unaware of his predicament. What do you plan to do to me? Do you know who I serve? All villains say this before they die, and the male lead follows his wishes. So tell me, who do you have above you? Have you heard of the famous lightning sect? Even if you have, you wouldn't understand. You should at least know how the lightning sect looked down on the literary emperor before the era of Linza. You should be able to understand that, right? As soon as he heard the word Wendy, the male lead seemed to show interest. He then stood up and said, "Are you talking about that unparalleled master, who's capable of anything, both elegant and brilliant? The Wendy?" The male lead then mentioned the name of his senior sister, Duan Yuehong, the woman the old man had killed using the Hahuan technique. Upon hearing this, the old man immediately became alert. Back then, the lightning sect clearly sealed off this information. How did the male lead find out about it? Faced with his question, the male lead didn't shy away. Instead, he directly told the old man that Duan Yuehong is his senior sister. Hearing this, he started to panic, shouting loudly, "Are you also from the lightning sect? Who are you, exactly?" And the male lead also lets him die with closed eyes. He directly tells him that he is Wendy Xianlei. Just hearing this name, he is already sweating profusely, trembling in fear. The reason he was able to escape disaster back then was all because of one person. That was the protagonist's master back then. He stood between the protagonist and the old man, and in that battle back then, the protagonist wiped out everyone involved by himself. He was the only one left alive because the protagonist crippled his meridians and cultivation. If the master hadn't stopped him, the protagonist would have taken him out long ago. And back then, the protagonist's master even promised him, "Drive him to a place where you can't see." But that's how fate is. In the end, he still fell into the male lead's hands. Last time, he escaped due to his luck. This time, the male lead won't let him go. Then, the male lead gently snapped his fingers. The surrounding Buddha statues began to move. The chains wrapped around the old man were now constantly pulling outward. Did you think the chains were pulling on his body? Then you were wrong. In fact, the chains were truly binding his soul. As the force increased, with a snap, his soul was torn apart. In the end, his body stood there like a lifeless shell, unmoving. Even when you looked at his appearance, the male lead thinks it would dirty his eyes. Then, it was just a simple test. He crushed his physical form to pieces. "Senior sister, it's been 500 years. Your revenge is finally fulfilled today." After dealing with this old man, he realized it was already the next day. At this moment, the male protagonist slowly walked out of the domain, thinking there shouldn't be anyone else here. But he sensed something was off. Then suddenly, boom, a shell exploded right next to him. He was completely stunned, having no idea what just happened. He just settled a long-standing grudge and was about to go celebrate. Unexpectedly, the moment he stepped out, he got hit by an explosion. The protagonist was so shocked he froze. He had no idea what just happened. When he came to his senses, he immediately started cursing. Who the hell bombed my territory again? And it turned out to be the blacksmith from earlier. He thought the protagonist might be in danger, so he rushed over non-stop. But unexpectedly, without knowing the full situation, he started firing directly at the protagonist's side. This made the protagonist very angry. However, he actually came here for something else, and it was for two very important things. With no other choice, he promised Yi Yuchan, in the future, try to inform him in advance. But seeing the male lead's smug face, Yi Yuchan was a bit skeptical and slightly disgusted. The male lead, full of righteous indignation, was still being mysterious. This made the male lead press a cannon barrel against his head. Watching this move by the male lead, frightened, he immediately took out a proper-looking bow and arrow. But when the protagonist got the weapon, he discovered a problem. He had turned Yi Yu-chan's weapon into a balance scale. Faced with the protagonist's surprised expression, he didn't mean much by it. He just assumed the protagonist was Yi Yu-chan's master. So he was, in a way, his semi-master. But this feature cannot recognize Yi Yu-chan as the master. Then it depends on his own fortune. I won't ask you for anything. Last time, the advance payment was for 10 boxes. The final payment of 15 boxes is not excessive, right? Looking at such quality weapons, the male lead resolutely agreed to his request. Then he took him and walked to the sect with the weapons. He was thinking of quickly showing it to Yi Yu-chan and having Duan Sheng explain how to use it. But just as he walked through the door, Yi Yu-chan threw herself into his arms, looking very worried about his safety. As for Yi Yu-chan's sudden embrace, the male lead seemed a bit overwhelmed. He then pulled out a weapon to get her attention. While your second uncle Duan Sheng is here, quickly test how your weapon works. If it's not handy anywhere, have him adjust it on the spot. Looking at the bow in her hand, Yi Yu-chan seemed quite satisfied. Then, holding the bow in her left hand, she formed an arrow with her right hand. With her own cultivation, she drew the entire bow back and shot towards the doorway. Fortunately, the male lead dodged in time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiao Yu-chan, why are you shooting arrows at the teacher? Just because Master Wei dotes on you doesn't mean you can act out against him. You know, at this very moment, Yi Yu-chan wasn't ashamed, but started to cry. Facing this situation, the male lead began to panic a little. He kept comforting Yi Yu-chan. Ever since I became your disciple, I've been running around with you like a headless fly, encountering so many chaotic things. You never explain anything, and often disappear mysteriously with the enemy like yesterday. No matter how powerful you are, people will still worry. Hearing this, the male lead suddenly felt a bit ashamed. He was overly worried about the male lead's safety. Yi Yu-chan actually cried. Facing this situation, the male lead started to panic a little. He didn't know how to handle it for a moment. In the end, he had to blame his disciple. After all, they still hadn't explained their identities to Yi Yu-chan. But for those enjoying the spectacle, this was the highlight. How could they possibly let it go? Now the male lead is in a difficult position. He can only bear it all by himself. With no other choice, he can only promise Yi Yu-chan to try to let him know in advance from now on. But looking at the male lead's expression, Yi Yu-chan is somewhat skeptical, accompanied by a hint of disdain. At this moment, Duan Sheng, who was standing nearby, suddenly said that Yi Yu-chan had already gained the recognition of this artifact. As for the two special features of the artifact, the first is that it can only fire swords formed by the cemetery order. As for the second feature, he didn't rush to explain. Instead, he jumped down from the jar of pickled cabbage. He walked up to Yi Yu-chan, thinking of demonstrating it to him in person. When Duan Sheng took the bow and arrow, with a click, he pressed a button on the bow. Immediately, the bow and arrow transformed into a hand cannon. In this state, the spiritual power would increase several times. In simple terms, it can kill above its level. After finishing his sentence, Duan Sheng fired a shot at the male lead. The power was immense. It directly sent the male lead flying. It seemed like he was taking the opportunity to give the male lead a beating. This way, he could return quickly. In an instant, Yi Yu-chan felt like he was on a roller coaster. Next, he explained to Yi Yu-chan the precautions and how to maintain the magical tool. Yi Yu-chan also noted everything down in his little notebook. After he finished speaking, he returned the bow and arrow to its owner. He handed it over to Yi Yu-chan. Then, he let Yi Yu-chan take it and get familiar with it. Meanwhile, he still had something to discuss with the protagonist. Yi Yu-chan didn't disturb them. He happily took the weapon and left, leaving the two of them behind. After Yi Yu-chan left, the male lead asked what else Duan Sheng needed from him. Duan Sheng opened the box in his hand, and a blue light shone from the box. It turned out to be the spiritual essence of the blue sky heavenly soldier that was entrusted to him for repair earlier. When the male lead saw this, his face immediately darkened. Only those with exceptional abilities can injure this thing. So the male protagonist decides to go check on Yoshida Yumi as soon as possible. Otherwise, he won't feel at ease. From the demon within Yi Yu-chan to what Qi Mengshu said before leaving, and now the matter of Lan Yutianbing. There must be some connection between all these events. After clarifying all the incidents, Wan Sheng picked up a broom and prepared to leave. He still needed to continue repairing Lan Yutianbing's soulbound artifact. But what the protagonist didn't expect at all was that he had casually mentioned it before, and he actually made the magic broom. Before leaving, the protagonist even saw him to the door, waving goodbye. The scene shifts. At this moment, Yi Yu-chan was practicing with the new weapon from the magic box in the training field, but he hadn't practiced for long. When the protagonist quickly grabbed him, he was about to take him to Jidianyu to solve the mystery surrounding him. As for how they'd get there, that part's simple. The protagonist said they'd fly there. At first, Yi Yu-chan was confused and didn't understand what he was talking about. In the end, the male lead pressed him down. Only then did he realize there were two chickens in front of him flirting. The hen, after being spotted, became very shy. At this point, Yi Yuchan finally understood. It turns out the plane the male lead mentioned earlier was real. Eventually, at the male lead's command, King Kong and Barbie got ready. They set off immediately. Have you ever flown in a real plane? And not just any plane, but a fighter jet? Even Yi Yuchan never imagined she'd get to ride in a fighter jet in her lifetime. Finally, at the male lead's command, King Kong and Barbie were ready. They set off immediately. The scene shifts, and now the male lead and the others are flying high in the sky. Sitting on the hen, Yi Yuchan asked about the hen under her. Is that your boyfriend? And King Kong replied, no. This is my third husband. For a moment, Yi Yuchan was speechless. Having a husband is one thing, but she didn't expect him to have so many on the male protagonist's side. At this moment, Barbie asked the male lead where he was going. The male lead honestly answers that he is going to offer a sacrifice to the sky goddess. Upon hearing that he has to go so far, Barbie initially thought the male lead had already prepared the non-Death King flower, but after Barbie asked him this, the male lead suddenly felt a bit guilty. Looking at his current expression, Barbie realized something was off. Upon learning that the male lead had not brought the king flower, he immediately flew into a rage. After informing King Kong, they turned around together. They headed back to the sect midway. No matter how the male lead tried to persuade them, it was useless. They insisted on going back to fetch the Overlord flower before leaving. Now the return trip would be quick. In an instant, Yi Yuchan felt like she was on a roller coaster. The scene shifts. At this moment, King Kong and Barbie are urging the Guwang army to pick the devil's flower. Meanwhile, Yi Yuchan is off to the side, vomiting continuously. I didn't expect to not get motion sickness on Earth, but coming here, I can't handle this kind of motion sickness. While they are talking, a noise comes from behind them. When they turn to look, it was Zhang Ruoxue, just getting out of bed. She stumbled towards them, but due to her serious injuries, she fainted again. Fortunately, Yi Yuchan caught her in time and reassured her that everything was fine. The people outside have already been chased away by the senior brothers and sisters. Just focus on healing here for now. But as for Yi Yuchan's kindness, Zhang Ruoxue rejected him. For a moment, Yi Yuchan and the male lead were confused. They had no idea what he meant. I'll leave as soon as I recover from my injuries. I absolutely won't trouble you any further. Facing his decision, Yi Yuchan was a bit worried. After all, his cultivation has been ruined. He has also lost an arm. It's too dangerous to wander alone. At this moment, Yi Yuchan is exchanging glances with the male lead, intending to have him take him in. He wants to have a junior sister, and after Yi Yuchan's numerous pleas, the male lead finally agrees to accept Zhang Ruoxue as his disciple. Then the male lead tosses him a ring, and from now on, he will be the male lead's 7th disciple. At the moment Zhang Ruoxue receives the ring, with a loud bang, the heavenly Tao's justice descends once again, rejuvenating him. He puts on the sailor suit specially prepared for him by the male lead. Not only that, the male lead took her hand and said he had something important to give her. He then ran into a room, locking Yi Yuchan outside, leaving the two of them alone inside. Soon, sounds of heavy breathing could be heard from the room. Yi Yuchan immediately sensed something was wrong, and even Jin Gang had to cover Barbie's ears. Seeing the male lead's retreating figure, Zhang Yuetian decided to take a trip. She wanted to seek opportunities to break through her bottleneck. After saying this, she waved goodbye to them. Who knows what kind of trouble this cross-dressing master will get into? Can you believe it? Just after the male lead accepted Zhang Ruoxue as his disciple, some unspeakable secrets happened between the two of them. Even Yi Yuchan couldn't help but curse when he pushed the door open, and the scene before him left him stunned. Zhang Ruoxue, who had originally lost her left arm, suddenly had a mechanical arm out of nowhere, which made Yi Yuchan so happy that he jumped into Zhang Ruoxue's arms, exclaiming how great it was. This arm is so cool. But before he could enjoy it for long, the male lead grabbed Yi Yuchan's hand and urged him to leave. He had finished his business. Let's hurry and set off. However, Yi Yuchan wanted to take Zhang Ruoxue along to Jidianyu. Ultimately, unable to resist Yi Yuchan's pleas, the male lead had no choice but to agree and take him along. The three of them were flying towards Jidianyu when suddenly a sound came from behind them. Is that you, Master Brother? That's Wang Jun's voice. When I turned around, I found he was also on a plane chasing after me. Then I learned from Master Brother that Lin Yuan's condition is a bit strange now. Hearing this, the male lead felt something was off. He immediately ordered Barbie to turn around and head back to the sect. The protagonist wants to see what's going on in person. When they arrived at the sect, Lin Yuan was lying on the bed in great pain. Upon learning of the protagonist's arrival, Lin Yuan slowly opened his eyes, but as soon as he opened them, he realized that the special condition of his pupils had awakened. This was something the protagonist never expected. He thought at his age, he wouldn't awaken this early, but this happened too suddenly. Now, the protagonist had no choice but to take him to the heaven prison. Once there, they'd see if there's any way to treat him. Just like that, their journey of 2 quickly turned into an adventure of 4. As the protagonist and the others left in the distance, Jiang Yuetian decided to go on a trip as well, to seek opportunities to break through the bottleneck. After saying that, he waved goodbye to them. Who knows what this crossdresser will come up with? The once bustling sect now had only the 3 of them left, and they had to start preparing as well. The scene shifts. At this moment, the protagonist's group is already above the extreme heaven prison, watching the snow gently falling before them. This is the first time Yi Yuchan has been in the snow, but the male lead doesn't respond to Yi Yuchan's surprised expression. He simply looks down. Below lies the desolate snowy mountains. Above them, there's a lake. On its frozen surface are countless ferocious beasts with sneering fangs. He recalls finding a silver frost ice flower here years ago. Maybe he can help Jiang Yuetian break through his bottleneck. Then the male lead ordered the plane to land at the foot of the snow mountain. The scene shifts. On the other side of the snow mountain, the trio is searching for something. The princess has ordered that they must quickly retrieve In Han at all costs. Binghua, what's wrong with you today? Why are you acting so timid? Facing Fan Luokuei's doubts, they immediately explained that the arid snow mountain has been haunted recently, and it's said to be a lingering snow ghost. But just as they finished speaking, they saw something moving in the distance. Because part of their view was obscured by heavy snow, they mistook the figure ahead for the snow ghost. What does it feel like to be mistaken for a snow ghost? Let Yi Yuchan tell you. Being a virgin who's lived for hundreds of years, he never thought one day a beautiful woman would protect him, because the monster he saw on the lake earlier was too terrifying. Yi Yuchan didn't dare to walk on the ice. This left the main character speechless. He didn't expect Yi Yuchan to be so timid, but Yi Yuchan was riding on his back. This made the male lead feel uncomfortable. With no other choice, he had to tempt Yi Yuchan down using martial techniques. When she learned she could pick a few techniques freely, Yi Yuchan immediately became interested. But at that moment, a hidden weapon suddenly shot toward Yi Yuchan from afar. Fortunately, they both reacted quickly. The male lead successfully caught the weapon. Yi Yuchan jumped off the male lead, perfectly cooperating to dodge the attack. The male lead even praised Yi Yuchan's quick reaction. Seeing the 3 figures approaching from afar, the male lead still couldn't figure out. He had no enemies here. Why was he suddenly ambushed out of nowhere? As they got closer to the male lead, the leader, Fan Luokuei, said, "I'll go save that man. You two stop the snow woman." As soon as he said that, both the male lead and Yi Yuchan were dumbfounded. What's even more absurd is, it was already ridiculous that Yi Yuchan was mistaken for the snow woman, but no one expected the male lead to be tackled by Fan Luokuei. This beautiful moment was deeply etched into Yi Yuchan's heart. "Don't be afraid of me. Our judges will protect you." As a virgin who has lived for hundreds of years, I never expected to be protected by a beauty one day. This scene left Yi Yuchan completely petrified. Why did he become the victim, while I became the one being protected? "Snow woman, you won't harm anyone in front of our judges. Just surrender." The 2 lackeys beside him also started warning Yi Yuchan not to move. Although the man was a bit scared, it didn't stop Yi Yuchan's anger. After all, she was called the snow woman. Yet the male lead didn't explain. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He directly took out the bow and arrows given to him by Duan Shang. In order to protect the seemingly fragile male lead, Fan Luokuei prepares to take action herself. If this continues, the male lead thinks the upcoming fight scene will definitely be thrilling. It might even turn into a situation where 2 women fight over 1 man. Just thinking about it excites the male lead. But to prevent things from escalating, he has no choice but to step forward and explain. After hearing the male lead's explanation, Fan Luokuei finally put down his weapon. He asked them what they were doing here. To avoid revealing his own itinerary, the male lead had no choice but to switch to a deceptive mode. He said he came here to find a secret realm, but this reason was too far-fetched, making it hard for Fan Luokuei to believe. After all, he'd never heard of any secret manual here. Even though it was just a misunderstanding, Luokuei still felt he had been a bit rude. He then walked up to Yi Yuchan and bowed to him at a 90-degree angle. He bowed to apologize. "As the captain of the judgment squad, I must take responsibility for my mistake." Watching him apologize so earnestly left Yi Yuchan feeling a bit at a loss. After all, it was just a misunderstanding. But Fan Luokuei seemed a bit dense, insisting that Yi Yuchan give him a chance to make up for it. Now, great. He was practically stuck to Yi Yuchan, clinging to that chance and not letting go. "Not to apologize. Fine, then we'll act as your guards. Otherwise, with your strength, you wouldn't be able to walk out of this snowy mountain alive." But faced with such a stubborn girl, the male lead had no choice. He could only let her follow along. And so, they set off on the journey to find the secret realm. Although this is the male lead deceiving them, the scene shifts. The male lead takes them to an abandoned castle. Looking at her unreliable master, Zhang Ruoxua feels she shouldn't have come along. Meanwhile, Fan Luokuei's subordinate seems to have discovered something. It hasn't even been a quarter of an hour. The protagonist discovered the hidden realm. He's really unfamiliar with the desolate snow mountain. Could it be that, like them, he's also here for the silver frost ice flower? Hearing this, Fan Luokuei's expression immediately darkened. If that's really what he thinks, there's no way he would let the protagonist have the silver frost ice flower. Upon hearing this news, Yi Yuchan felt a bit jealous. Did you say your home isn't at Yuntian Academy? How did this place become your home again? Is it because it's a good place for your fellow townsfolk? Facing Yi Yuchan's questioning, the male lead gave him a light smack on the head. What are you thinking about all day in that little head of yours? This is my old home, but I can't confirm it yet. He doesn't dare to act weakly. He can only try to coax the male lead from the side. The girl is quite suspicious. Look at my pure face. Do I look like I would deceive you? If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself. Since the male lead said so, he took the lead and walked into the ruins. Unexpectedly, as soon as he entered, he noticed something strange. The scene inside was completely different from what he had seen outside. Inside, he saw branches and stone figures charging at him, roaring. They appeared tall and mighty, but in reality, they were just lifeless puppets. Number 7 puppets. Fan Luokuei easily dealt with them in a few swift moves. Getting rid of all the stone men was incredibly easy. After he finished, he told the main character and the others they could come in. But just as Zhang Ruoxue was about to go in, the main character stopped her. Then he drew a circle at the feet of Ling Yuan and Zhang Ruoxue. He told them to stay inside it, and not to come out. After all, they are now of no use. Not only that, the male lead kindly took out something nice for him, so he could pass the time with these when he was bored. After settling them down, the male lead and Yi Yuchan walked into the ruins. But just as they entered, a huge magical array appeared on the ground. There's a large pit in the center of the magic array. Countless skeletons are floating above it, and the little sister beside them realizes that these skeletons are all from her sect. Immediately, Fan Luokuei draws his weapon. After all, the one who led them into this dire situation is the protagonist. Ever since you found this place so easily, I felt something was off about you. What's going on here? Please explain. In the face of his doubts, the male lead didn't want to explain further. After all, the dried blood on the ground and the rotting bodies in the pit clearly indicate that many years have passed since their deaths. He never expected that one day he would also be wronged. At first, he spoke to Fan Luokuei in a friendly manner. Later, the male lead directly pointed it out. The dried blood on the ground and the rotting bodies in the pit clearly have been dead for many years. Do you still want an explanation? But the more logical and reasonable he was, the more Fan Luokuei felt there was something wrong with him. To avoid alerting the snake, he thought about disguising himself first. Once he found strong evidence, he would definitely catch the male lead himself and bring him back to Shinpango for investigation. However, the formation was too strange, making it impossible for them to break it. Then the male lead had no choice but to take out the teleportation scroll he carried with him. Looking at such a valuable item, the male lead surprisingly gave them a copy as well. This made Fan Luokuei even more suspicious by half a point more. Meanwhile, Yi Yuchan, noticing something was off, used brainwaves to ask the male lead what was going on with those people. The male lead didn't avoid the question. He told him that he killed them. Who told them to trespass and even attempt to harm the master? Upon hearing this, Yi Yuchan felt a bit jealous. Didn't you say your home was Yuntian Academy? So why is this suddenly your home now? Is it because it's a place where your fellow townspeople live? Facing Yi Yuchan's questioning, the male lead flicked his forehead. What are you thinking about all day in that little head of yours? This was my home before. Then the scene cuts. They were teleported to a large doorway. Looking at the towering door in front of them, Fan Luokuei asked the male lead if this was their final destination. The male lead did not avoid the question. This was exactly where he wanted to be. At first, the male lead thought about showing off to Yi Yuchan, explaining how impressive his little guardian was. But just as he was about to wake them up, an accident occurred. No matter how the protagonist called out to them, they didn't respond at all. This can only mean one thing. It means they were killed by the intruders. Finish your business and investigate later. I want to see which foolish person dared to break into my house and even killed my guardian beasts. Just as the protagonist was about to lose his temper, a clanging sound from the side caught his attention. He turned his head to look. He saw the trio working hard to break open the door, just as they thought they were about to break through and complete the secret realm task. The protagonist casually pushed the door open with one hand. The trio was completely stunned at the sight. When they looked into the hall, they found something like an ice flower in the center. As they approached, they realized that the object before them was the silver frost flower they were looking for. They thought that this journey had finally fulfilled the princess's request. Bringing it back would surely earn them a reward, but to their complete surprise, they saw an extremely unfriendly scene. The male lead actually reached out and grabbed the silver ice flower, then licked it. Not only that, he even tasted the flavor of the silver ice flower. Turns out it tasted like peach. Seeing their surprised expressions, the male lead asked, "Are you looking for him too?" After they left, the gluttonous night rain cicada asked the protagonist, "Is the silver cold ice flower you mentioned really peach flavored? Can I have a taste too?" But to help Jiang Yuetian successfully break through, the protagonist refused. He said, "Let's see how much is left when we get back. Then I'll let you try some." Someone actually dared to snatch the protagonist's stuff. They must have lost their ambition. However, in the face of Fan Luokue and his group, the male lead is not worried at all, because together, they can't defeat him. Moreover, the male lead even revealed their princess's intention. She just wants to forcibly occupy his silver cold ice flower and make them scapegoats. Not only that, the male protagonist still wants their princess, ENGSUB, from the past generations to confront him in person. Unfortunately, he learns from Fan Luokue that ENGSUB has been in seclusion for 100 years. He simply cannot meet with the male protagonist. Seeing that the male protagonist showed no intention of giving in, Fan Luokue had no choice but to resort to force. Now it's a mess. Everything has slipped out of the male protagonist's control. There was no other way. The protagonist had no choice but to make a bet with him. If he won, Hanbing would save him. Otherwise, if he lost, he would leave immediately. And the bet was simple. If he could withstand 3 moves from the protagonist, he would win. After hearing the male lead's words, Fan Luokue took the initiative and attacked the male lead. With a chopping strike, he aimed at the male lead. Unfortunately, the male lead easily dodged it. With the male lead's guidance, the first move passed just like that. Next was a sideways half-moon slash, but the male lead dodged it with a backbend, calmly preparing for the second move. In the instant the male lead stands up, he doesn't forget to remind Fan Luokue, "You have one last chance." Hearing this, he reacted in that brief moment. But unfortunately, he failed again. His third move was easily caught by the protagonist with just 2 fingers. This time, he lost the match, so the protagonist's silver frost flower won't be given to him. Then the protagonist applied just a little force and easily broke his sword. This was something Fan Luokue never expected. He kept wondering just how strong the protagonist really is, but his 2 underlings were really worried about him. After all, he lost so badly that he even broke his own blade. Facing the reality before him, Fan Luokue generously admitted his defeat. Seeing that he didn't press the issue, the protagonist gave him a teleportation scroll. It could directly send Fan Luokue and his group away. When he received the scroll from the protagonist, this made him feel a bit incredulous. But regarding the male lead's kindness, he remained just as straightforward. "Once we return to the palace, I will report your situation truthfully." After the princess said this, she turned and left with her followers. Perhaps they could find the silver cold ice flower elsewhere. After they left, the gluttonous night cicada asked the protagonist, "Is the silver frost flower you mentioned really peach flavored? Can I have a taste too?" But for Jiang Yuetian's successful breakthrough, the protagonist refused. He said, "Let's see how much is left when we return. Then I'll let you have a taste. For now, let's go meet your senior sisters." On to the next place. After dealing with Fan Luokue and his group, the protagonist and his companions walked out of the secret realm and stood in front of Zhang Ruoxue. He asked the protagonist why Fan Ruoxue's trio left early. But the protagonist didn't explain much, simply saying they found what they were looking for and let them leave first. After finishing the explanation, the male lead then put Lin Yuan into his spatial ring. Yi Yuchan was startled and hurriedly tried to stop him, but upon learning that the male lead's spatial ring was special, Yi Yuchan finally felt at ease. The scene shifts. They are on a plane heading to their next destination, and the destination is the Northern Ice Palace, a perfect snow castle. When they arrived here, it was just a grand gate. It looked majestic and imposing, glittering with gold. Yet Ye Yuchan couldn't feel happy at all, because what should have been a half-day journey was dragged out to 3 days by the male lead, who's terrible with directions. And to make matters worse, the male lead shamelessly said, "I just wanted to show you all the snowman scenery." Seeing that she had no way to deal with the protagonist, she eventually had no choice but to obediently follow him into the ice palace. When the protagonist reached the main entrance, he suddenly acted very sneaky, knocking with a secret code. Unexpectedly, someone from inside responded to him. It even seemed like they were eagerly anticipating his arrival. In the end, they had the right signal. The large door slowly opened. The scene inside was truly a paradise on earth. Each one was as beautiful as a celestial fairy. The one leading the group rushed over to the male lead. She hung onto him completely. Seeing this scene, Yi Yuchang was furious. Fortunately, Zhang Ruoxue stopped her. Otherwise, the consequences are unimaginable. After that, even sleeping is accompanied by a girl soothing him to sleep. It's simply a treatment fit for a queen. Once they finish being intimate, the girl in the male lead's arms looks over at Yi Yuchan. Her gaze is like she's seen a treasure. In the blink of an eye, he disappears from the male lead's arms. Even the male lead didn't notice. It turned out he had approached Yi Yuchan and Zhang Ruoxue. His hands restlessly wandered all over them. Then he blatantly ignored the male lead. He took the two of them inside, leaving the male lead standing there dumbfounded. Perhaps this is the loneliness of the strong. The scene shifts. At this moment, the two of them are enjoying unprecedented pleasure. Don't get the wrong idea. They're just taking a bath, though they do have someone giving them a massage. Once they're done bathing, a feast is prepared for them afterward. It's like an all-inclusive service. Even when they go to sleep, there's a girl to lull them to sleep. It's simply a queen-like treatment. As for the male lead, at this moment, he asks the girl where MANHUA and the others have gone. The response he receives is the same as what Fan Luakue said earlier. He has been in seclusion for a long time. He still hasn't come out. Upon hearing this, the male lead seems to sense a hint of conspiracy. Various conspiracies are continuously coming to light. This makes the male protagonist feel that something is wrong. Now even his old friend, ENGSUB, has encountered an accident. Since announcing his seclusion, he hasn't come out once. Currently, the person taking charge of the North Ice Palace is someone named Fan Donglin. Since he took office, he hasn't found any useful information. After hearing about these events, the male protagonist begins to ponder. In the end, he gathered some information. The protagonist seems to have discovered something. From the Tree of Dreams to the Blue Sky Palace, then to the monster inside the night and cicada. When you connect all these events, you'll find that someone is deliberately targeting 21 Extreme. After hearing this from the protagonist, the girl immediately grabbed his hand and said, "This is no small matter. I might have someone here who can give you some clues." Then they whispered a few words in the male lead's ear. Now the male lead has a direction for his investigation. Just in case, he also gave the male lead the ice order from the Ice Palace. That way, the guards won't dare to stop him. Looking at the token in his hand, the male lead felt a bit confused. "Isn't this supposed to be with your princess? How could it be with you?" But he didn't tell the male lead this secret. He said he would explain it to you later. The scene shifts. You see a pair of hands slowly opening the large door in front. Upon closer inspection, this person is actually Yu-chan. A red carpet was laid out in front of him. Above, a coffin was floating. Driven by curiosity, Yu-chan slowly walked forward. When he reached the coffin, he looked at the person lying inside. Yu-chan's face showed a terrified expression, completely unable to believe what he saw, because the person lying in the coffin is actually himself. Then he pulled hard. He threw Yu-chan onto the bed. He asked, "Did you really soul travel here?" At this moment, he slowly opened his eyes while lying in the coffin. Immediately, he controlled several blood-red tentacles to attack Yu-chan. Before Yu-chan could react, she was tightly entangled by these tentacles. No matter how much Yu-chan struggled, it was useless. In the end, she was brought face to face with another version of herself. Terrified, she immediately woke up from the dream. The vividness of the scene left him shaken for a long time. The male lead and Zhang Ruoxue, who were next to him, were both very concerned. They asked him what he dreamed of that scared him so much. Yu-chan did not hide anything. He told them about his dreams in detail. Hearing this, the male lead immediately started to comfort him, saying, it's okay. Don't be afraid, dreams are the opposite of reality." But that scene and the feeling were too real. It didn't feel like a dream at all. The male lead tried to dispel his thoughts. He continued to comfort Yu-chan. In the end, under the male lead's reassurance, he gradually regained his calm. A nightmare quietly revealed Yu-chan's true identity. Perhaps he is not a traveler. However, with the male lead's constant reassurance, he gradually dismissed this thought. At this moment, the male lead was planning to leave the room, taking advantage of the full moon night to teach Zhang Ruoxue some techniques. But Yu-chan looked at the male lead with his big, captivating eyes. It seems like she wants the male lead to stay with her, and Zhang Ruoxue, standing by, also notices her intention. So she says she has already memorized the technique. The rest she can figure out through meditation on her own. Grateful for Zhang Ruoxue's kindness, the male lead naturally doesn't refuse. He immediately takes off his shirt and slips into Yu-chan's bed. "With me around, no evil spirits dare to come. You should get some sleep." Half an hour passed in the blink of an eye. Neither of them fell asleep. Seeing that they couldn't fall asleep for a long time, Yu-chan suggested playing Truth or Dare. However, because it was the middle of the night, playing Dare would only make it harder to sleep. So the male lead decided to play Truth or Dare. As soon as she heard the male lead agree, Yu-chan immediately turned and happily faced him. However, before she could ask, the male lead blurted out a series of numbers. "Anyone get it? Let me know." Faced with these random numbers from the male lead, Yu-chan was completely baffled at first. Then, after understanding what it meant, she immediately showed a disgusted expression. She grabbed a pillow and pressed it against the male lead's face, who told him to act like a pervert right in front of her. He kept mouthing off despite Yu-chan's retaliation. The male lead didn't just sit there. He grabbed her waist with one hand, then, with force, pulled her in. Yu-chan was pushed down onto the bed. She asked, "Did you really come here through soul transfer?" Faced with the male lead's advances, Yu-chan found it hard to resist. However, she still answered his question honestly. Upon learning that he really did come through soul transfer, the male lead immediately felt relieved. Then Yu-chan asked him, "You mentioned before that you are Emperor One. Is this true? When you were Emperor Wen, did you have many close female companions?" When Yu-chan asked this, the male lead couldn't help but recall the past. Yes, there were many, but there was only one true love. As soon as she heard the words beloved, Yu-chan's mood immediately fell. Then she turned around and said, "I'm tired. Thank you for keeping me company. Let's call it a day." Faced with Yi Yuchan's jealousy, the male lead didn't ask any further. But regarding the things in Yi Yuchan's dream, the male lead feels a bit incredulous. Could he really be him? To uncover the truth, the male lead decides to visit his tomb. When the male lead opens his eyes again, his soul has arrived in an unfamiliar place. Looking at Suzuki before him, the male lead feels a bit downcast. Before long, he stepped into the Suzuki before him. The long-buried story would one day be revealed. Gazing at the beloved Suzuki in front of him, the protagonist's emotions were hard to read. Before long, he stepped into the tomb before him. He arrived at a place that was both familiar and strange. It was also the world he least wanted to be in. Looking around, everything seemed normal. Perhaps he was just overthinking. The night rain cicadas shouldn't have anything to do with him. It was time to move on to the next place. But before setting off, let's go meet the princess of the Northern Ice Palace first. Then, led by a young woman, the male lead arrived at the center of the Northern Ice Palace. However, a familiar figure approached him. It was none other than Fan Luokue. He asked the male lead how he got in, but the male lead didn't answer him. He simply greeted him casually. They are the assassins sent by Fan Dongying. It's a pity their trap failed to kill the male lead. In the end, thanks to the girl's notification, Fan Luokue learned that the male lead entered through connections. Since you know each other, then let Captain Fan take him to meet the princess. Upon learning the male lead's purpose, Fan Luokue was somewhat surprised. He then informed the male protagonist that the princess is currently in seclusion for cultivation. If he wants to meet her, he should come back in 7 days. Although the male protagonist already knew the outcome would be this way, he still politely replied to Fan Luokue. Then he turned and left. This further confirmed for the male protagonist that there was something wrong with the princess. The scene shifts. A man is seen holding 5 silver frost flowers in his hands, and this man is none other than Fan Dongying, the current princess of the Northern Ice Palace. As for the 5 silver frost flowers in his hands, they were painstakingly found by Fan Luokue. At this moment, he clenches his fist, because he can finally avenge his mother. As his mind becomes clouded by hatred, a hand helped him up. This person is the current princess of the Northern Ice Palace. She is also his father. Moreover, Fan Luokue recounted in detail the process of meeting the male lead. Upon hearing this, Fan Dongying said to him with a feigned air of virtue, "Alright, this is something that Wei's father will send someone to investigate. In the coming days, you should make this public." Wei's father secluded himself for 7 days and saw no one. When Fan Luokue heard this, he felt something bad was about to happen. The scene shifts. At this moment, Fan Dongying is leisurely feeding fish. He hasn't gone into seclusion to cultivate. Moreover, he ordered his men to follow the protagonist and the others, because just now, the male lead and his group have already left the Northern Ice Palace. The fish that were just swimming lively have now been poisoned to death by him. As the conspiracy gradually surfaces, can the male lead overcome this challenge? That depends on him. At this moment, he's preparing to head to the next location. However, sensing that danger was imminent, the male lead specifically reminded Yi Yuchan and the others to brace themselves, because just now, the male lead discovered with the divine stone that several little Gaga were following him closely. So, unless something unexpected happens, there will definitely be an incident. Immediately after, an explosion occurred behind them. However, they were mostly unharmed. It just fell onto a thicker, solid patch of snow. When Yi Yuchan woke up from her coma, she found herself lying in an unfamiliar place, and saw Zhang Ruoshua unconscious beside her. She quickly ran over to check on the situation, but little did they know, as soon as they woke up, they kept vomiting. It seems they experienced dizziness during the crash. Fortunately, Yi Yuchan was already used to such minor situations, so she was fine after waking up. At the moment, Yi Yuchan hadn't noticed the male lead's presence. She kept calling his name repeatedly. Suddenly, the snow beneath them started to bulge. It seemed like something was about to break through the surface. Then, the male lead's head popped out from the snow. He looked like he was thoroughly enjoying it. However, before he could react, the one who ambushed them stepped out. They were assassins sent by Fan Dongying. Unfortunately, their trap failed to kill the protagonist. But the next second, things got weird. The blonde guy suddenly jumped on the leader. And the girl next to them? She just quietly watched them being all lovey-dovey. This ridiculous combination made the male lead a bit overwhelmed. Yi Yuchan was directly hiding behind the male lead. When Huang Mao realized that this was not the time for romance, he instantly disappeared from his spot. He appeared in front of the male lead, raising his hand slightly to lift his chin. He carefully observed the male lead's face. Could he really be betraying him? But later, the three of them laid it all out. They revealed the name of their group. We are the trio symbolizing love and peace. Flower Warriors. This made the male lead's skin crawl. It was simply unbearable to watch. He immediately pulled out a rocket launcher and fired at them. Countless shells came rushing towards him. However, they were all blocked by the male lead. Unfortunately, this shot did not cause them any actual harm. As the smoke dissipated, the three of them stood there unharmed, facing the male lead's attack. They didn't rush to counterattack. Instead, they introduced themselves to the male lead one by one. The first to appear is this seemingly beautiful crossdresser, called the Dream Girl actor. Next up is the leader of the trio, Edward, the guy with Du Xingqi. And the last one, who looks the most normal, He calls himself the human masterpiece, Prince Mithraea. This is so ridiculous. When the eccentric protagonist meets the eccentric killer, what kind of experience will that be? Honestly, even the protagonist can't handle it. Anyone watching would feel uncomfortable. Their attitude towards the protagonist. The blonde guy on the side was furious. He raised his bow and shot at the protagonist. Even the sword was heart-shaped. But luckily, the protagonist reacted in time. He pinned down Yi Yuchan and the others barely dodged the strike. Although the protagonist and his group dodged the strike, the shockwave still caused them significant harm. Seeing how strong the opponent was, Yi Yuchan immediately looked at the protagonist pitifully. They're too strong. If we fight, I'll only hold you back. Why don't you put me into your spatial ring? But Zhang Ruoxue was thinking about fighting them to the death. However, she couldn't quickly restore her previous cultivation. When he heard her thoughts, the male lead certainly wouldn't disappoint them. He then took their hands and said this flash charge of energy could temporarily enhance their cultivation. But there's a time limit. It's rare to find capable opponents to practice with, so experience it in reality. Enjoy the thrill of facing a strong opponent. In an instant, their cultivation reached the cave void stage. Before the battle, the male lead reminded them to fight quickly. They must avoid a prolonged battle. But the words of the male lead were heard clearly by the trio nearby. They mocked them for being foolish. However, regarding their mockery, the protagonist didn't care and turned around to look at them. During this time, he had agreed to meet Yi Yuchan here. After finishing his words, in the blink of an eye, the protagonist appeared in front of Blondie. He was so fast that Blondie didn't even have time to react. He raised his fist, as big as a clay pot, and swung it at Blondie. For bombing my disciple. Now take this punch first. That punch landed squarely on blonde hair's face. From the way his face distorted, you could tell it was no ordinary punch. After knocking him away, the main character decided to use him as a training tool for his apprentice. Then another punch hit the snow. The force was so great it cracked the ground. In that brief moment, the main character also set up a large formation. He sealed himself and the remaining two little Gaga in the formation. This way, they wouldn't interfere with his disciple's battlefield. Looking at the grand formation in front of him, Edward hurriedly asked Manhwa to stop the protagonist. But this formation couldn't possibly be created by someone in the void refinement stage. Manhwa had no way to stop it. Once the protagonist finished setting up the formation, it would be time for him to make his move. Facing the male lead's actions, Edward has already determined that the other party's strength is on par with his own. So he lets Manhwa act according to the situation. Meanwhile, he confronts the male lead head-on. Although he himself isn't entirely confident, how would he know without trying? Then, several bullets were fired from his hand. But unfortunately, these bullets couldn't even break the male lead's shield. It seems the gap between them is enormous. Seeing the opponent preparing to snipe, the protagonist pulls out a Gatling gun to engage in a shootout. Even Edward's proudest ammunition is overwhelmed by the protagonist's firepower. This was completely unexpected. He never thought he would lose to the protagonist in firepower, because his own firepower was insufficient. With a loud bang, the bullets all shot toward his chest. He was brutally knocked onto the snow on the other side. The scene was simply unbearable to watch. Earlier, the male lead pulling out a rocket launcher was already ridiculous enough. I didn't expect there would be something even more absurd later. Now facing a formidable enemy, the male lead even pulled out a Gatling gun, and he crushed the opponent with overwhelming firepower. He directly blasted him into the snow on the other side. He thought this would take care of a small problem, but when the male lead turned around, he noticed something was off. He saw countless shells coming at him. However, he managed to block them one by one. Faced with such a sharp offensive, the male lead couldn't help but admire his own reaction time. The continuous shelling relentlessly bombards the male lead. Edward dares not show the slightest negligence. After all, the male lead not only instills fear in Fan Dongyin, but also possesses such powerful mechanical weapons, so he must give it his all. Otherwise, his own life might be lost here. He doesn't know how long he has been firing, until he runs out of ammunition. It finally stopped. Watching the explosions in the distance, Edward thought the male lead couldn't possibly survive. Then, with a magnificent turn, he left the battlefield without looking back. The sound of explosions continued behind him. He thought he could pull it off, but unexpectedly, the male lead was unharmed. He even mocked him, saying real men never look back. Still too inexperienced. If he hadn't met someone kind like me, he would have suffered for sure. After saying that, the main character disappeared. All that was left was a faint blur. Before he could react, the main character was already behind him. The male lead followed up with a charged kick straight at him. The speed was so fast it seemed to carry lightning. With a solid kick, he had no way to defend himself. Once again, he was kicked away. He returned to that familiar place. These three people didn't seem like extremely evil individuals. They even felt overly pure. With such strength, why would they serve others? After thinking it over and over, the male lead still couldn't figure out the right answer. Besides, the group had just arrived here. Whose way did they block? Anyway, since they couldn't figure it out, they might as well get the answer from those three. Several energy balls shot toward Edward, exploding with a boom on impact. The protagonist wasn't idle either. He took a running start, ready to return to the starting point. With a push of his feet, the protagonist flew over once again. Meanwhile, on Edward's side, facing the protagonist's continuous bombardment, he had no power to resist. He could only watch helplessly as the attacks came his way. He responded immediately. At this moment, he was already on the ground, barely alive. The male protagonist had also come to his side. Facing him lying on the ground, the male protagonist did not believe he would die like this, and he did not disappoint the male protagonist. His whole being floated in the air, surrounded by red lightning. For such a formidable enemy to the male protagonist, Edward says he loves fighting strong opponents the most. This time, the protagonist has successfully ignited his fury. Let's make this battle even more intense. A clash between modern weapons and cultivation world weapons. Which one is more powerful? We'll soon have the answer to that question. After all, this war could be considered a cross-century battle for the protagonist. Edward, who has been knocked down again and again, finally unable to hold back, he uses his ultimate move. Seeing his opponent's serious attitude, the protagonist feels it's time to show his true strength. Then, Edward leaps into the air. His limbs begin to detach from his body, breaking apart into 4 missiles aimed at the protagonist. This is his ultimate killing move. Immediately after, with a whoosh, 4 missiles came at the male lead. However, at the speed of the male lead, these missiles couldn't hit him at all. Although the male lead dodged the missiles, these 4 missiles were controlled by Edward's mental energy, so even if they didn't hit the male lead, these missiles would still follow him. Through Edward's relentless efforts, he finally caught the opportunity. Taking advantage of it, he sealed off the male lead's escape route. This created a situation that was sure to hit. With a loud bang, 4 missiles exploded right in front of the male lead. Now this is bad. Even the dream girl lost her chance to strike. But before he could even rejoice, he sensed a dangerous presence. He wanted to warn Edward, but it was already too late. The protagonist appeared behind him once again. He had no time to react. He could only watch helplessly as the protagonist's electrified hand chop struck the back of his neck. The next second, his consciousness began to blur. Then he fell heavily to the ground. He lay still, unconscious and unresponsive. A stunning blow struck the back of his neck. The next second, his consciousness began to blur. Then he fell heavily to the ground, lying still, unconscious and unresponsive. The male lead approached him. He was about to perform a soul-searching technique on him, but suddenly, he caught a whiff of blood. In that moment, the male lead paused. When he came to his senses, the fallen Edward had already disappeared. Meanwhile, the dream girl silently approached the male lead from behind, and opened her own barrier. With the blood of the object, I command you to obey. The male protagonist slowly turned around as if enchanted. Then Manhwa ordered the male protagonist to stab himself with Edward's earlier move. Receiving the command, the male protagonist complied obediently. He suddenly thrust his hand, entwined with spiritual energy, toward his own abdomen. But just at the critical moment, this hand suddenly stopped. At this moment, the male protagonist is talking to himself, saying, I can't die yet. I still have one wish to fulfill. And the zero power in his hands is slowly dissipating. Watching the male protagonist slip out of his control, the dream girl doesn't know what's happening. She can only wait and see what he intends to do. Then, the male protagonist's tears began to flow uncontrollably. I still don't have a girlfriend. I haven't done it yet. I don't want to die yet. Upon hearing this, the dream girl was momentarily taken aback by the male lead. Seeing no other way, she had no choice but to let the male lead fulfill his wish in her dream. As for the male lead's dream lover, the dream girl was actually curious to see what it would be like. You'd never know unless you saw it. As soon as he saw it, he completely broke down. Even though we don't know what he saw, all of this is just an illusion created by the male lead. Can you believe it's been 500 years? And the male lead is still a virgin. If he hadn't said it himself, I wouldn't have believed it even now. To make up for the male lead's regrets, the dream girl has no choice but to fulfill his wishes in his dreams. But what he never expected was that all of this was just a facade created by the male lead to put him at ease so that he could let his guard down, allowing the male lead to control him better. The scene shifts, and the male lead successfully brings him into the dream and even controlled his consciousness. From now on, he's the king here. And crucially, the kind holding a whip. But in the next second, Manhwa immediately changed his outfit, turning into a cat-eared girl. Although the scene was quite exciting, but you have to remember he's a man. Now it's time for the male lead to ask questions. I ask you, why did Fan Dongying send you to assassinate us? We've only been here a few days. We shouldn't have provoked him. Master, it's because he said your presence is hindering that lord's plan. Finally, there's a clue this time. When the male lead continues to ask who that lord is, He just can't remember anything. It's as if part of his memory has been erased. He only remembers the issued order, and that order is to assist Fan Dongying in killing someone extreme, and to monitor Fan Dongying. If he has any thoughts of rebellion, then eliminate him as well. The male lead is somewhat surprised to hear this. That was 21 extremes. Why is Fan Dongying so confident? And who is the person behind him? Then the male lead asked him when he came to Beibing Palace. The answer he received was 3 years ago, which was when the last princess died. Although this conspiracy has made some progress, but in the male lead's mind, everything is still shrouded in mystery. And the next question. He could only draw a complete blank. Seeing that he couldn't get any answers, the male lead had no choice but to investigate himself, to see who was playing tricks right under his nose. The scene shifts, and cracks begin to appear in the dream's boundary. Then there was a loud bang. The entire barrier was shattered by Edward. Afterward, he helped the fallen Mangli up, and the whole dreamscape dissipated as well. Didn't expect you to recover so quickly. Looks like those above gave you plenty of life-saving treasures. Seems I've been in seclusion for too long. I didn't realize the world had become so hectic. They barged in and tried to take my kill. Knowing the male lead's strength, they immediately knelt down. They pleaded with the male lead for a quick death. However, the male lead did not kill them. Instead, he was very interested in their superiors. Edward understood what the male lead meant. Upon learning that he was willing to be his insider, the male lead had no doubts about his intentions. He directly gave him a spatial ring. Inside were recovery pills and the tribulation pill he needed. The protagonist's approach could be said to have completely controlled them. After the protagonist left, Manhwa asked Edward, "What is the origin of this lord? Could he be a demigod from the movies?" And based on Edward's brain's conclusion, the male lead's strength is far more than just a demigod. Then he pointed to the sky, but he did not reveal the male lead's true cultivation level. When a person becomes strong to the point of suffocation, perhaps that's what it means to be a true powerhouse. When asked about the male lead's true strength, Edward did not disclose it to him, so he pointed to the sky. You can imagine what kind of monster they just faced. The scene shifts. At this moment, Yi Yu and Shan lie trembling in a pool of blood. Even the bow given to them by Duanqing was crushed by Xiao Gaga. But now, Xiao Gaga is completely different, having transformed from a handsome blonde into a bald brute. What on earth is going on? This has to start from an hour ago. At that time, the yellow-haired guy was knocked out of the barrier by the male lead. He is now staring into Yi Yu-chan's eyes. Before the battle began, he couldn't help but make a joke. Could this be the legendary trio? I've only heard people talk about it before. I didn't expect it to happen to me, the prince. For Zhang Ruoxue, who has violent tendencies, what the guy with yellow hair said was all nonsense. In a blink, she rushed forward to attack the guy with yellow hair. Unfortunately, he easily dodged her with a quick jump. He didn't forget to mock Zhang Ruoxue in the process. He completely disregarded the two of them. Regarding his attitude, Yi Yuchen was very angry, raised the palace in hand and shot at him, but he easily dodged it again. The key is, he even started performing acrobatics. This isn't just mockery anymore, it's downright arrogance. To him, the two of them are insignificant. And while he was doing the splits, Zhang Ruoxue wasn't idle either. He leaped into the air and kicked down towards him. It was obvious that this move was also dodged by the blonde. In the meantime, he curled up into a ball, bouncing around on the ice. He looked like he was having a lot of fun. When one plan fails, Zhang Ruoxue followed up with the next move and leaped into the air again. A powerful strike came crashing down. But this time, the blonde-haired guy didn't plan to keep playing. He dodged this move and ran behind Zhang Ruoxue. Yi Yuchan, who was beside him, immediately shouted for him to be careful behind. But hearing this, Zhang Ruoxue already sensed something was wrong. By the time he reacted, there wasn't enough time to gather strength to respond, so he could only treat a dead horse as a living one. He braced himself to take the punch from the blonde-haired guy. As their fists met, at the moment of the clash, it was practically sparks and lightning, and during their exchange of punches, a sword formed by spiritual energy shot off the blonde guy's wig. Seeing this scene unfold, Zhang Ruoxue was completely stunned, while Yi Yuchan thought the wig looked pretty good, and considered buying one for her senior brother. But regarding the incident of his wig being shot off, the blonde man's expression immediately darkened. He was extremely angry. Then he started pulling the nails out of his head one by one. In the next moment, his body suddenly swelled up, bursting his entire shirt. A bald muscular man suddenly appeared. This is the true appearance of the blonde man. Faced with the sudden change of the blonde, Yi Yuchan and the others also began to be cautious. But the blonde didn't pay them any mind. He let out a cold snort. Then, he quickly charged towards them. What to do when encountering a psychopath? Just run immediately. Otherwise, his terrifying nature is something you can't handle. Night Rain Cicada and Zhang Ruoxue are the best examples. At this moment, both of them are lying in a pool of blood, completely motionless. Meanwhile, Huang Mao takes out a recovery pill and leisurely drinks it. In an instant, the injuries he just sustained are fully healed. As for the two who fell, Huang Mao thought there was no need to finish her off anymore. Then he turned around and left. But what he didn't know was, a mysterious force was surging into Zhang Ruoxue's body at that moment. Just as Huang Mao was about to leave, he sensed something unusual. When he turned around, he saw Zhang Ruoxue floating in midair. Under the light of the full moon, a crescent mark appeared on his face. In the next moment, he opened his eyes, staring intently. The reason the blonde was like this was all due to the moon summoning technique practiced by Zhang Ruoxue. Not only that, his moon summoning technique also attracted heavenly thunder. This gave Yi Yuchan, who had fallen to the ground, a chance to catch his breath. With the help of this double power-up, the two of them were fully revived on the spot. But looking up at the sky, Yi Yuchan realized it was almost midnight. They didn't have much time left. This time, they had to finish the fight quickly. They couldn't afford to fail again. Otherwise, their current cultivation will revert to what it was before. Immediately after, Zhang Ruoxue kept throwing punches at the yellow-haired man. However, this had no effect on him at all. He even mocked her for it. But before he could finish mocking, his expression immediately turned ugly. It turned out that Zhang Ruoxue took advantage of his carelessness and delivered a powerful kick to him. Who can hold back from this? Then he was seen covering his crotch with both hands, constantly hopping back and forth on the ground. At this moment, Zhang Ruoxue took the opportunity to run behind him. She grabbed him firmly, locking him tightly. He didn't even have a chance to resist. At this moment, Yi Yuchan in the distance was already ready. But due to the constant struggles of the blonde, it made it difficult for Yi Yuchan to take action. But now there's no time for her to hesitate. Zhang Ruoxue cannot hold her down forever. Seeing that Yi Yuchan was slow to act, Zhang Ruoxue hurriedly shouted for her to shoot, because she knew she couldn't hold on much longer. Finally, Yi Yuchan made up her mind. She aimed carefully and shot at the yellow-haired guy's chest. At the same time she released the arrow. She reminded Zhang Ruoxue to get out of the way. Seeing the flying sword coming, the yellow-haired guy realized the danger. But no matter how she struggled, it was useless. She could only watch helplessly as the flying sword pierced into her body. At this moment, the yellow-haired guy trembled with fear. It looked like it was about to collapse. Yi Yuchan quickly picked up Zhang Ruoxue and jumped to a distance. They had already reached their limit. If the blonde guy didn't go down soon, they would be the ones to suffer. It's hard to say if it was their good luck, or if the blonde guy was just unlucky. Due to Yi Yuchan's Lingyuan power, it naturally carried lightning. It just happened to provoke the heavenly thunder, striking down on the yellow-haired guy. In an instant, he was bombarded with screams. He really is out of luck. Now the yellow-haired guy's morale is shot for a while. They also felt relieved. But just in case, they were still thinking of hitting the yellow-haired guy with some explosives. But just as they were about to make a move, the male lead suddenly appeared behind them. The next second, Yi Yuchan immediately turned around and hugged the male lead and started crying about all the terrible things Huang Mao had done. Meanwhile, Zhang Ruoxue was furious about her own misfortune, vowing to become invincible in the future. Alright, I get it. This time you encountered a real maniac during your training, and you've suffered for it. What reward do you want? Just say whatever comes to mind. Hearing this, they immediately cheered up. They had already forgotten about what just happened, but seeing Yi Yuchan hanging onto him, the male lead quickly told him to get down. He didn't forget to take the chance to pinch his thigh, but he noticed he seemed to have gained some weight. Hearing the male lead say he is fat, Yi Yuchan is even more unwilling to come down. She keeps hitting the male lead's chest. After the farce, the male lead prepares to continue to the next stop. The cold breeze ruthlessly blows against their faces, and the remaining hair of the blonde gradually falls away with the wind. Looking at the few strands of hair left on his companion, he couldn't hold on to them. They couldn't bear to tell Huang Mao, but those words were overheard by the now awake Huang Mao. Tears of frustration streamed down his face. Watching as the main character and his group boarded the plane and left, Huang Mao asked why the main character didn't kill them, and Edward explained the reason. The scene changes. The main character and his group arrive in a desolate place. There is no wealth here that rivals a country, as the male lead said. Not even a shadow can be seen. Little do they know, two people are secretly following them from behind, and they learn from the man that he and the others are master and apprentice. However, before the man could finish, the red-haired girl told him to be quiet. Meanwhile, on the male lead side, looking at the seemingly ordinary snowfield in front of him, but there are quite a few traps hidden within. He waved his small hand. The clever force shattered the illusion on the surface. Then the true appearance of the snowfield gradually emerged. The shadows wrapping the object slowly dissipated. Here, there are not only thousands of killing traps, but also illusions to confuse the eye. If you walk over there, it's hard not to trigger anything. Wait until the male lead finishes speaking. Their feet started shaking beneath them. What's going on? Could it be that we triggered a mechanism? Seeing their panicked expressions, the male lead calmly said, "Weren't you all eager to meet my old buddy? Well, here he comes." At first, the two of them were completely confused. They had no idea what the protagonist meant, until the protagonist told them to look underground. At first, they didn't notice anything unusual. But the next second, a giant dragon burst out from the ground. He is the male lead's old buddy, the Black Dragon King, Jueying. The male lead's friend has to be a dominant figure in the area. Otherwise, it would be a bit embarrassing for him. For example, the one making an entrance now, the pitch-black Black Dragon King, Jueying. Seeing this scene before them, both Yi Yuchan and the others are a bit surprised. They were slightly scared into a black and white state. Then, the giant dragon rises into the air and curls up in a ball. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into human form. Then he landed straight in front of the male lead. He didn't forget to say hello. At this moment, his face became clearly visible. But artist, are you sure he didn't come over from the Demon King's side? Facing the way he was getting handsy with Jueying, the male protagonist feels disgusted. Then he punched him in the face. But he still refuses to give up. So long no see. He was so cold when he first arrived. It's a shame that I came out specially to pick you up. He still looks the same. The male protagonist just chooses to ignore it. He started introducing each of his new disciples. Upon hearing this, Jueying acted out of character. He suddenly became very gentlemanly and even introduced himself to them. But when he saw Yi Yu-chan, he was completely stunned, sensing something was off. Even Yi Yu-chan was confused. When you come back to your senses, Jueying immediately came to the hero's side. Why are you still playing stand-in jokes? Aren't you afraid of overturning in the future? When the male protagonist heard this, he immediately panicked. Ask him to stop talking nonsense later, because their conversation was a bit fishy. So Yi Yu-chan hid behind them and eavesdropped. Unfortunately, they couldn't hear anything useful. While they were chatting, the male lead's ring started flashing. Then, suddenly, Ling Yuan jumped out of it. Luckily, the male lead caught him in time. At this moment, Ling Yuan, in the male lead's arms, was in great pain. He reached out, wanting the male lead to help him. But before the male lead could speak, Jueying spoke first. Isn't this a reunion? Why is this vessel with you? For a moment, the male lead was confused. How does he know Lin Yuan? Although Jueying wanted to answer him, his avatar couldn't last long outside. So he thought of Heishui Abyss. After explaining to the male lead, she suddenly transformed and returned to her original form. At this moment, Yeyu and Chan on the dragon's back remained motionless, afraid of making any mistakes. Just as they were about to head to Blackwater Abyss, the male lead suddenly turned and shouted toward the dragon's spine. Seeing that their tracking had been discovered by the male lead, the two hiding behind the spine had no choice but to come out obediently. Regarding the male lead's behavior, they couldn't figure it out at all. Right now, your time is limited. This is the last chance. Do you want to go to Blackwater Academy to paint? As the scene shifts, a giant dragon soars in the sky. Just moments ago, Zhang Ruoxue was on the dragon's back, but now she has run to the dragon's head, kept asking endless questions. It's like his mind is filled with 100,000 whys. Meanwhile, Yi Yu-chan, who knows the male lead's identity, was sorting out the relationship between them in her mind. Now, can you enlighten us? How did you know we came for Heishui Abyss? And why are you helping us? Facing their questions, the male lead answered honestly, what's so hard to guess? Who comes to Longgu Huang if not to find the Blackwater Abyss? As for why he wants to help them, at first, the male lead didn't answer. He just asked, are you a descendant of Chu Lantian? Who doesn't have a dragon friend? Look at this one, is it not impressive enough? It can be compared to the Demon King's subordinate, Diablo. You can't say it's completely unrelated. You can only say they're exactly the same. At this moment, the group is sitting on the back of a giant dragon. They're about to head to the Blackwater Abyss. When asked why he was helping them, the protagonist didn't answer at first. He just asked, are you a descendant of Chu Lantian? Regarding the protagonist's question, Xu Xing was completely stunned. Meanwhile, Fang Yan thought the male lead was amazing. How could he even know this? Then he couldn't help but reveal their backgrounds. But halfway through speaking, Xu Xing, having snapped out of it, covered his mouth. At this point, he realized he had said too much. Since Fang Yan had already let it slip, Xu Xing didn't shy away from it either. So he asked how the male lead knew his ancestors. Because you carry my inherent soul absorption, I know your identity. Upon hearing this, Xu Xin was once again astonished. Knowing his ancestors, doesn't that mean he's from the previous era? Looking back at all the little moments from the past, back then, the male lead was still chatting and laughing with his elders, leisurely playing chess under the tree. But because the male lead was too impulsive before, he viewed everything with a narrow mindset. At that time, his motto was to be indifferent to life and death, and fight anyone who disagreed. Not even his friend Chu Lantian could talk him out of it. He even calculated that if the protagonist continues like this, in a few decades, he'd be done for. Faced with his friend's doubts, the protagonist, of course, shot back, you're cursing me. Let's make a bet then. Loser calls the other grandpa, and his friend didn't hesitate. He picked up his glass and clinked it with the protagonist's. Be careful. I have never lost in my life. Thinking back to the past, perhaps at that time, Chu Lantian didn't realize his end was near, or maybe he actually did know, but didn't want the protagonist to worry. So, in facing his descendant, the protagonist directly says that he is my grandson. The people around couldn't help but burst into laughter, but Xu Xing sat there awkwardly. Later, during their conversation, the protagonist learned that they went to the Blackwater Abyss for archaeology, and they were researching Emperor Wen's history. Hearing this, Yi Yu-chan laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the lair of the Absolute Shadow, a pitch-black underground palace, and his real body is also sitting here. You can also see he has multiple wounds on his body. When the protagonist asked what happened, he didn't rush to explain. At this point, the protagonist understood what he meant. Then he loudly shouted that there are countless treasures in the cave. Take whatever you like. The four of them were overjoyed when they heard this. Then he happily ran into the cave. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan, who was in the male lead's arms, was set down by him. After they were dismissed, the male lead helped him heal his wounds while listening to him tell stories. 3 years ago, Lin Yuan was brought to his side. The person who brought him over was 21 Extreme. One of them, Inhan Shuebing, turned out to be the original holder of the dual pupils. Worried that something might happen to him, he decided to transfer the dual pupils to Lin Yuan. When Zhu Ying asked him what had happened, he refused to say. Later, he transferred his dual pupils to Ling Yuan. That's why when Ling Yuan got close to this place, the reason why the pupils react is by looking at the sleeping Ling Yuan. The protagonist's doubts are growing. In the end, the protagonist asks Zhu Ying to analyze who exactly is trying to harm the 21 extremes. Starting with the demon inside my sixth disciple, Yi Yuchan, then the shattering of Lan Yu's heavenly soldier's soul, and Shi Mengshu being hunted down. This time, when we came to Jitian prison, first, we encountered a disciple from Beibing Palace searching for the silver frost flower. Then, on the way here, we were hunted down by people sent by the new princess, Fan Dongying. These events seem unrelated at first, but in fact, they're all connected to the male lead. Suddenly, it feels like everything has been laid bare. Even Zhu Ying is starting to believe that all of this was caused by the male lead. Yet the male lead stands smugly on the side, thinks he's too handsome, has been envied by others. The male lead, who was just smiling, suddenly becomes serious. Is there really such a person in this world? It seems his ability is on par with mine. But no matter what the male lead says, in Zhu Ying's mind, he will always be the strongest. After all, the male lead stayed in a small room with a great beauty like ENGSUB for 3 days and nights, and didn't do anything, just to cultivate. 500 years have passed. Looks like the male lead has truly earned the title of an old beast. After all, with such a beauty like ENGSUB, he stayed in a small room with her for 3 days and nights, just to cultivate. Zhu Ying can testify to this. It can be said to be absolutely certain. As for Zhu Ying exposing his own dirty laundry, the male lead didn't go easy on him. He punched him right in the face and said he didn't have time to deal with him. You can take care of your injuries yourself. He intended to remind him to be careful in the future, but he didn't get the chance to say it. Then, they saw something shocking. They saw, near the tail of absolute shadow, Fan Yen was about to use an iron shovel to pry off a dragon scale. That way, their research could make further progress. Chu Xian and his partner were sneaking around doing something bad, under Chu Xian's instigation. But before they could execute their plan, the male lead nearby gave him a good scolding and threw them onto the dragon's head. Let Zhu Ying watch over them. Meanwhile, the protagonist walked over to Lin Yun and picked him up. If you have any questions for Zhu Ying, ask them quickly. Realizing the protagonist was about to leave them, they hurriedly took out some paper, asking questions while taking notes. When they asked about Emperor Wen, the male lead specifically reminded them not to write recklessly. It would tarnish Emperor Wen's reputation. After the reminder, the male lead placed Ling Yuan back into the spatial ring. Then he remembered that there was also the useless Jiang. The male lead intentionally reminded him not to defame Emperor Wen. After explaining everything, the male lead and his group prepared to leave to find an important person. Watching the protagonist's figure fade into the distance, Xu Xing also realized who his grandfather had spoken about back then. Years ago, his grandfather lay on his deathbed, barely holding on, but his affection for him hadn't diminished in the slightest, and just before he passed, he urged Xu Xing to find the protagonist. As long as he is there, the empire will not fall. After he finished speaking, he lowered his head. Chu Xian's grandfather fell into an eternal sleep. Thinking of that moment, it brought tears to Chu Xian's eyes. The scene shifts. At this moment, a man is being chased by several tigers. By sheer bad luck, he trips over a rock while running. He fell to the ground. The pack of tigers behind him gradually approached. Seeing their ferocious appearance, the man had already given up hope. He then closed his eyes and silently thought of his long-deceased wife. At that moment, a voice suddenly came. Hey man, can I ask you something? The man who was just in despair immediately opened his eyes. He stared at the unfamiliar man in front of him. He was completely stunned. No matter how the protagonist questioned him, there was no response. Frustrated by the lack of reply, the protagonist had no choice but to take out a Gatling gun, preparing to deal with the group of tigers. But before the protagonist could act, the tigers pounced on him first. However, the Gatling gun in the protagonist's hands wasn't for show. Bullets rained down on them. In an instant, he wiped them all out. And they even emitted a roasted aroma. Seeing the tigers easily dealt with by the protagonist, the man thought of thanking him. Halfway through speaking, he fainted due to his severe injuries. At this moment, Zhang Ruoxue, possessed by her inner foodie, approached the tiger and remarked that the teacher's fire control is quite impressive. Now, all it needs is a sprinkle of cumin and chili powder to be ready to eat. As for Yi Yuzhan, he came to the man's side, to check if he had any dog eggs. The final conclusion was that he had fainted. Moreover, he discovered a badge on the man's waist. A few lines of text were written above. By the time the male lead and the others reacted, they picked up the sign and prepared to investigate. What should you do if a group of fierce tigers comes charging at you? The male lead has a good method for you. Take out the Gatling gun you've prepared in advance and open fire on the charging tigers. Absolutely effective. After dealing with the tiger, Yu found a tag on the man's waist, and there were a few lines written on it. Then the protagonist followed the tag's instructions to the designated place and kindly handed the tag to the caretaker, saying, "Brother, we're here to find the jade white bird." The caretaker who received the sign looked at its content, then turned around and went into the residence, asking the main characters group to wait at the entrance for a moment. No one knew how much time had passed. Suddenly, the main door opened. A girl in a pink dress ran straight towards the main character without a word, and immediately threw herself onto him, muttering nonsense under her breath. "You finally came back." Seeing this scene, the two standing beside were completely confused. Then the girl pulled the male lead's head into her arms, leaving him, who wanted to explain, speechless. Meanwhile, Yi Yuchan's expression changed instantly from confusion to anger. If Zhang Ruoxue hadn't stopped her, I was afraid this girl would have been torn apart by Yi Yuchan. At this moment, the girl lying on the male lead seems to have noticed something was off. She then opens her eyes and realizes she has mistaken him for someone else. In an instant, she is completely stunned. The key point is that people around start gathering to watch. The girl wishes she could find a hole to hide in. Meanwhile, Yi Yuchan finally can't take it anymore. She shouts loudly, "Why don't you get off him already?" Hearing that, she has a way out. The girl immediately scampered away. Just as he was about to leave, a hand pulled him from behind. It was Zhang Ruoxue who grabbed him. "Why are you running? Are you going to ignore Hu Xiaolin?" On Yi Yuchan's side, she was already clinging to the male lead, sulking. Faced with the male lead's teasing, Yi Yuchan is not willing to back down. She keeps pulling at the male lead's face. The scene shifts. In order to communicate better, they moved to a room and explained everything to the girl. In fact, the girl knows he will get into trouble sooner or later, but no matter how the girl tried to persuade him, it was useless. The reason is simple. Because Hu Xiaolin's wife and daughter were killed by that group of tigers, so he wanted to kill all the tigers to avenge them. Now the protagonist and his group finally understand why Hu Xiaolin was there. As for that tag, the girl secretly slipped it into his pocket. She was just afraid he'd run into danger, and there'd be no one to claim him. If he finds out, he's definitely going to scold me again. After all, in his heart, the only person he truly loves is his late wife. During their conversation, Hu Xiaolin, lying in bed, started to react. The moment he sat up, the girl immediately rushed forward in excitement. But the first thing Hu Xiaolin asked when he woke up was about the person who saved his life. At this moment, the male lead jumped out from the side. "Thank you for saving me, benefactor. I have no way to repay you, old Hu. I am willing to go through fire and water for you, benefactor." Regarding his speech, the male lead was not interested. However, he indeed had one thing to ask him for help with. Then, the male lead took out the ice-cold order from the Northern Ice Palace from his spatial ring. He also mentioned the name Huingluan that Hu Xiaolin used before in Beibing Palace.